Hello, good morning สวัสดีค่ะคิดว่าทุกท่านน่าจะได้ยินเสียงชัดเจนนะคะ โอเคค่ะ ก็สำหรับวันนี้นะคะเราจะเป็นงานเวทีสัมมนาสาธารณะโครงการพัฒนานวัตกรรมเพื่อยกระดับดัชนีชี้วัดการรับรู้การทุจริต CPI ของประเทศไทยนะคะ โดยจะเป็นการจัดผ่านการประชุมระบบออนไลน์ Zoom Meeting นะคะ ซึ่งกำหนดการโดยคร่าวของวันนี้นะคะคือเราจะเริ่มกันด้วยการกล่าวต้อนรับของอาจารย์วิทยาศาสตร์ปัญชัยนะคะที่แถลงสถาบันพระปกเกล้าแล้วก็ต่อกันด้วยการบรรยายแลกเปลี่ยนความรู้ประสบการณ์ต่างประเทศนะคะโดยเซสชั่นที่1เนี่ยค่ะจะเป็นกรณีศึกษาของประเทศอินโดนีเซียนะคะโดยเราได้รับเกียรติจากวิทยากรคุณกริกสุปราดิโอโนนะคะมาบรรยายให้เราในวันนี้ส่วนในเซสชั่นที่2เนี่ยค่ะจะเป็นเช่นเดียวกันค่ะการบรรยายแลกเปลี่ยนความรู้ประสบการณ์ต่างประเทศค่ะแต่ในครั้งนี้เป็นกรณีศึกษาจากองค์กรที่ได้มีความร่วมมือแล้วก็มีส่วนร่วมเป็นอย่างยิ่งในการได้เข้ามาทำในเรื่องของcorruption นะคะนั่นก็คือ Variety of Democracy หรือ VDEM นะคะโดยในวันนี้เนี่ยเราก็ได้รับเกียรติจากวิทยากรอาจารย์อาเรนพิกเกนนะคะที่จะเข้ามาร่วมสนทนากับเราในวันนี้และเมื่อทุกท่านเนี่ยได้บรรยายเนี่ยเราจะให้เวลาผู้เข้าร่วมประชุมหรือว่าผู้ที่รับชมจากทางไลฟ์เนี่ยค่ะสามารถส่งคำถามหรือว่าเปิดเป็น discussion กันได้ประมาณ30นาทีนะคะหลังจากที่จบเลคเชอร์ของแต่ละท่านค่ะแล้วก็เมื่อเสร็จสิ้นนะคะทั้งสองเราก็จะเปิดเป็นเวทีให้ร่วมแสดงความคิดเห็นได้ค่ะอีกประมาณครึ่งชั่วโมงนะคะเพราะงั้นเนี่ยนี่ก็จะเป็นกำหนดการคร่าวๆสำหรับการประชุมหรือว่าเป็นการเปิดรับฟังเวทีสัมมนาสาธารณะของในวันนี้นะคะนอกจากนี้เนี่ยค่ะเนื่องจากวันนี้จะเป็นการบรรยายโดยวิทยากรต่างประเทศเพราะงั้นเนี่ยเราจะใช้ภาษาอังกฤษเป็นหลักแต่ว่าในซูมของเราถ้าทุกท่านสังเกตเห็นตรงแถบข้างล่างนะคะจะมีตัวลูกโลกอยู่ซึ่งทุกท่านเนี่ยสามารถกดเข้าไปฟังเพื่อที่จะฟังล่ามในการแปลจากภาษาอังกฤษเป็นภาษาไทยได้นะคะแต่ว่าในตัวออนไลน์ไลฟ์ของเราผ่าน Facebook เนี่ยอาจจะเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะคะเพราะฉะนั้นเนี่ยทั้งหมดวันนี้ก็จะมีเป็นกำหนดการคร่าวๆโดยเท่านี้นะคะเดี๋ยวต่อไปเดี๋ยวจะขอเชิญศาสตราจารย์วุฒิสารตันชัยนะคะเลขาธิการของสถาบันพระปกเกล้าเนี่ยกล่าวขึ้นต้อนรับแล้วก็ร่วมปราฐกฐาพิเศษสำหรับงานในวันนี้ค่ะ
สวัสดีครับท่านผู้มีเกียรติที่เคารพครับGood morning Mr. Giri Supradiano and Professor Alan Higgins
Good morning, Prof.
Yeah,
Professor, good
first of
morning.
all, I would like to thank all two speakers that are joining us in the public lecture today. And please allow me to give a welcome address and give some notes in Thai language. And I'm sure that you can get a translation from that. ท่านผู้มีเกียรติที่เคารพครับปัญหาเรื่องของการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันของประเทศไทยก็เป็นปัญหาที่ถูกหยิบยกขึ้นมาเป็นเรื่องสำคัญของประเทศนับตั้งแต่การมีการเปลี่ยนแปลงกระบวนการในการพัฒนาทางการเมืองหลายครั้งการปฏิวัติรัฐประหารบ่อยครั้งข้อเหตุผลสำคัญก็คือการอ้างถึงการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันและผมคิดว่าจนมาถึงวาระในสภาพการปัจจุบันเราก็จะเห็นว่าบทบาทของหน่วยงานที่ทำเรื่องการป้องกันและปราบปรามคอร์รัปชันทั้งสำนักงานปปช.และสำนักงานปปท.เองก็จะเห็นว่าปัญหาเรื่องของการคอร์รัปชันเป็นเรื่องที่มีมากมายมีกรณีศึกษามากมายแล้วก็เป็นเรื่องที่มีคดีถูกตัดสินคดีแทบทุกวันระบบศาลก็กลายเป็นศาลชำนาญพิเศษที่มีเรื่องของการศาลทุจริตคอร์รัปชันซึ่งสิ่งเหล่านี้เป็นพัฒนาการที่อาจจะพูดว่าไม่น่าเป็นสิ่งที่ภูมิใจสำหรับสังคมไทยเพราะว่า ปัญหาการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันกลายเป็นประเด็นสำคัญดังนั้นผมคิดว่าส่วนหนึ่งของปัญหาการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันที่เกิดขึ้นก็ถูกหยิบยกมาเป็นประเด็นสำคัญในยุทธศาสตร์ชาติในเรื่องของการปรับปรุงการแก้ปัญหาเรื่องการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันเป็นหนึ่งในเป้าหมายต้นๆของ5 ปีแรกของการ ดำเนินการเรื่องการแก้ไขปัญหาเรื่องทุจริตคอร์รัปชันของประเทศไทยและที่สำคัญก็คือว่าประเด็นของการกำหนดตัวชี้วัดในเรื่องของยุทธศาสตร์ในเรื่องของการป้องกันและปราบปรามการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันนั้นเราได้เลือกเอาสิ่งที่เรียกว่าดัชนีการรับรู้การทุจริตหรือ Corruption Perception Index หรือที่เรียกกันย่อๆว่า CPI เป็นตัววัดแล้วก็เป็นที่น่าตกใจว่าคะแนนของ CPI ของประเทศไทยก็อยู่ในระดับกลางๆและบางปีก็ลดต่ำลงดังนั้นก็เป็นเรื่องที่มีความสำคัญครับที่เราจะได้มีโอกาสเรียนรู้ประสบการณ์และก็แนวทางการทำงานที่หลายประเทศที่สามารถทำให้ดัชนีการรับรู้การทุจริตหรือ CPI ยกระดับขึ้นแน่นอนครับว่าการวัด CPI ประเทศไทยไม่สามารถที่จะควบคุมหรือ control อะไรได้แต่ว่าในขณะเดียวกันสิ่งสำคัญสำหรับการแก้ปัญหาการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันของประเทศนั้นผมอยากมีข้อคิดหรือข้อเสนอ 2-3 ประเด็นในระยะเวลาเพียง 4-5 นาทีนี้นะครับผมคิดว่าประเด็นแรกเลยของเหตุแห่งการทุจริตหรือคอร์รัปชันนั้นเนี่ยผมคิดว่ามีเหตุหลายประการทั้งในเชิงของตัวระบบการทำงานแล้วก็ตัวบุคคลถ้าเรามองถึงเจตนาหรือตัวบุคคลที่ทำให้เกิดการทุจริตนั้นเราอาจจะเห็นว่าอาจจะมีเหตุตั้งแต่เรื่องแรกที่สุดเลยคือบุคคลคนนั้นมีความจงใจหรือมีเจตนาที่จะทุจริตคนกลุ่มนี้ก็เป็นคนกลุ่มแรกครับที่เราจะต้องสนใจว่าคนเหล่านี้มีสาเหตุมาอย่างไรแต่แน่นอนครับนอกจากการจงใจหรือการที่จะมีเจตนาอย่างชัดเจนจะทุจริตแล้วเนี่ยก็อาจจะมีคนกลุ่มอื่นๆครับที่ประสบปัญหาของการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันเช่นทำเพราะไม่รู้ทำเพราะไม่ทราบกติกาทำเพราะเข้าใจว่าทำได้คนกลุ่มนี้อาจจะเป็นคนอีกกลุ่มหนึ่งที่เราอาจจะต้องแยกออกมาแล้วก็มาดูกันว่าเราจะแก้ปัญหากับคนเหล่านี้ยังไงแนวทางที่คณะกรรมการปปช.เองอนุกรรมการหลายชุดของคณะกรรมการปปช.ทำก็คือการสร้างคู่มือการสร้างแนวปฏิบัติการสร้างกรณีศึกษาเพื่อให้ความรู้ความเข้าใจต่อคนเหล่าที่ไม่รู้ถึงกติกาทั้งหลายครั้งครับของการทุจริตนอกจากการเจตนาทำเพราะไม่รู้แล้วบางครั้งก็อาจจะถูกบังคับผมคิดว่าการถูกบังคับก็คือผู้ที่อยู่ใต้บังคับบัญชาได้รับการบังคับด้วยอำนาจไม่ว่าจะเป็นอำนาจด้วยทางตำแหน่งหน้าที่หรืออำนาจในเรื่องของการเมืองเราจะเห็นหลายครั้งครับคดีทุจริตคอร์รัปชันคนที่โดนอาจจะพูดว่าปลาซิวปลาสร้อยก็คือเจ้าหน้าที่หรือข้าราชการที่รับผลแต่คนที่เป็นคนริเริ่มส่วนใหญ่แล้วหลักฐานก็จะไปไม่ถึงครับกรณีศึกษาแบบนี้มีเยอะแล้วก็คนที่รับผลลัพธ์ของการได้รับโทษก็จะเป็นเจ้าหน้าที่หรือเป็นข้าราชการระดับต่ำลงมาแน่นอนครับเหตุแห่งการทุจริตอีกเรื่องหนึ่งที่อาจจะเห็นชัดก็คือการกลั่นแกล้งหรือการล่อซื้อในทางการเมืองวิธีการอันนี้ก็เป็นวิธีการหนึ่งในการที่จะทำให้เกิดคู่ต่อสู้ในทางการเมืองนั้นจำเป็นที่จะต้องออกจากตำแหน่งด้วยการล่อซื้อโดยเฉพาะอย่างยิ่งในวงการของการปกครองท้องถิ่นเราจะเห็นมีการล่อซื้อมีการกลั่นแกล้งหรือมีการสอดไส้เพื่อทำให้คนเหล่านี้ผู้บริหารท้องถิ่นเหล่านี้ที่อาจจะไม่รู้หรือไม่รู้เท่าทันก็เจอปัญหาครับและประการสุดท้ายที่สำคัญก็คือเหตุคือระเบียบที่อาจจะออกมาแล้วไม่เอื้ออำนวยต่อการทำงานที่ต้องการความคล่องตัวการทำงานที่ต้องการการตอบโจทย์ที่มีความหลากหลายในขณะที่ระเบียบปฏิบัติมีลักษณะที่เป็นกรอบที่แคบเกินไปตรงนี้ก็เป็นปัญหาสำคัญที่จะทำให้เห็นว่าระเบียบต่างๆหลายครั้งที่ออกมาในวาระหนึ่งอาจจะไม่เหมาะสมกับสถานการณ์หนึ่งในอนาคต ดังนั้นการทบทวนถึงกฎกติกาหรือระเบียบก็มีความสำคัญครับผมคิดว่านี่คือสาเหตุใหญ่ๆที่เราจะมองถึงเหตุของการทุจริตโดยมองจากตัวบุคคลซึ่งการทุจริตเหล่านี้เป็นการทุจริตทั้งระดับที่เป็นกรณีศึกษาเล็กๆจนไปถึงกรณีของการทุจริตเชิงนโยบายที่มีการทุจริตและทำให้เกิดความเสียหายในระดับที่ใหญ่ขึ้นผมคิดว่าเงื่อนไขสำคัญของการที่จะแก้ปัญหาการทุจริตนั้นผมเสนอว่ามันมีสัก 3-4 เรื่องครับเรื่องแรกคือการบังคับใช้กฎหมายที่เข้มข้นแน่นอนครับการบังคับใช้กฎหมายที่เข้มข้นนั้นเราต้องการความสมดุลครับความสมดุลระหว่างกฎหมายในการป้องกันการทุจริตกับประสิทธิภาพของกฎหมายในการบังคับใช้นั่นหมายถึงว่าสาระของกฎหมายต้องมีความสมดุลการที่เราไปวางน้ำหนักของกฎหมายหรือแนวปฏิบัติในการป้องกันการทุจริตผ่านกฎหมายด้วยการไปเฝ้าระวังมากจนทำให้เกิดโอกาสของการทุจริตเลยก็อาจจะเป็นปัญหานะครับเพราะว่ากติกาหลายอย่างอาจจะไม่ได้เหมาะสมแล้วก็อาจจะไม่สามารถที่จะเอามาใช้ได้กับการป้องกันการทุจริตเราอาจจะต้องมีการประเมินกันครับว่าการชี้แจงบัญชีทรัพย์สินเนี่ยตกลงแล้วมันสามารถวัดการทุจริตได้จริงไหมเมื่อเปรียบเทียบกับภาระของผู้ที่ต้องแจ้งเหตุผลเหล่านี้เป็นประการสำคัญครับในการที่เราต้องจะมีการทบทวนหรือการนำเสนอข้อลักษณะต้องห้ามทั้งหลายที่มีมากมายจนทำให้คนเกรงว่าไม่อยากจะเข้ามาเพราะฉะนั้นชุดความคิดที่มองคนว่าเราจะป้องกันการทุจริตแบบไหนเป็นเรื่องสำคัญนอกจากนั้นการบังคับใช้กฎหมายที่เข้มข้นนั้นผมคิดว่าสิ่งสำคัญมากก็คือการบังคับใช้กฎหมายภายใต้หลักนิติธรรมหลักนิติธรรมก็คือกฎหมายนั้นมีสาระที่เหมาะสมและที่สำคัญมากคือการบังคับใช้ ที่เท่าเทียมเป็นธรรมไม่เลือกปฏิบัติการใช้กฎหมายที่เป็นธรรมไม่เลือกปฏิบัติจะทำให้เกิดศรัทธาต่อระบบกฎหมายในการป้องกันการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันเพราะฉะนั้นผมคิดว่ากระบวนการอันนี้ก็เป็นเรื่องที่มีความสำคัญมากๆครับของการบังคับใช้กฎหมายที่เป็นอยู่นอกจากนั้นการบังคับใช้กฎหมายที่ผมอยากเสนอเพิ่มเติมก็คือการทำให้ต้นทุนการทุจริตแพงต้นทุนการทุจริตแพงก็คือการที่มีกระบวนการที่ตรวจสอบจับต้องได้ของการทุจริตและมีบทลงโทษที่หนักอย่างเสมอภาคกันผมคิดว่าสิ่งนี้เป็นสิ่งสำคัญที่จะทำให้คนเวลาตัดสินใจว่าจะทุจริตหรือไม่เนี่ยเมื่อคำนึงถึงผลลัพธ์หรือผลที่ตามมาโดยดูจากกรณีศึกษาต่างๆแล้วก็จะเห็นว่าไม่คุ้มค่าแต่เมื่อไหร่ก็ตามถ้ากระบวนการของการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันและมีกระบวนการในกระบวนการยุติธรรมใช้เวลานานเกินไปหลายคนอาจจะตั้งข้อสังเกตครับทุจริตขนาดใหญ่กว่าจะรู้ผลก็10 ปี15 ปีพอตัดสินคดีก็เสียชีวิตพอดีก็สุดท้ายก็ยังมีความสุขอยู่กับผลของการทุจริตนั้นเพราะฉะนั้นการทำต้นทุนการทุจริตให้แพงก็คือการทำให้การบังคับใช้กฎหมายกระบวนการยุติธรรมการกำหนดบทลงโทษการพิพากษาคดีรวดเร็วขึ้นบนความเป็นธรรมและในขณะเดียวกันคือการเดินขนานกับการให้ความรู้กับคนทำงานครับการให้ความรู้กับคนทำงานก็จะเป็นส่วนสำคัญมากที่จะทำให้คนเหล่านี้หลีกเลี่ยงหรือไม่เจอกับความเสี่ยงของการทุจริตนี่คือเรื่องของกระบวนการใช้กฎหมายทั้งหมดที่ผมอยากจะนำเรียนเสนอเป็นข้อสังเกตเบื้องต้นกระบวนการอันที่สองที่ผมคิดว่ามีความสำคัญมากคือการปรับกระบวนงานหรือการปรับกระบวนการทำงานของระบบเราต้องยอมรับนะครับว่าสมการคอร์รัปชันที่เราพูดกันคือคอร์รัปชันเนี่ยมันเท่ากับการมีดุลพินิจบวกการผูกขาดแล้วก็ลบด้วยความรับผิดชอบเพราะฉะนั้นเมื่อไหร่ก็ตามถ้าเราสามารถปรับกระบวนการทำงานด้วยการลดการผูกขาดแล้วก็เพิ่มลดการใช้ดุลพินิจและทำให้เป็นระบบเปิดมากขึ้นทำให้เห็นว่าใครรับผิดชอบในเรื่องใดและที่สำคัญคือการทำให้ระบบและกระบวนการนี้เป็นกระบวนการที่เปิดเผย ที่เราเรียกว่า Open Process กระบวนการแบบนี้จะช่วยทำให้การดำเนินการทุจริตทำได้ยากขึ้นครับและประการสุดท้ายที่ผมคิดว่ามีความสำคัญมากก็คือการสร้างวัฒนธรรมทางสังคมและวัฒนธรรมของหน่วยงานวัฒนธรรมของหน่วยงานคือการสร้างวัฒนธรรมของหน่วยงานที่ยึดเรื่องของธรรมาภิบาลเรื่องของ governance เรื่องของความโปร่งใสเรื่องของการเปิดเผยข้อมูลข่าวสารเป็น open government open governance การสร้างวัฒนธรรมอันนี้จะทำให้คนทุกคนที่ปฏิบัติงานรู้สึกว่ากำลังทำหน้าที่อยู่ภายใต้การถูกเฝ้าดูของสังคมส่วนวัฒนธรรมอันที่สองคือการสร้างวัฒนธรรมของสังคมใหญ่ที่เรียกว่า social norm ที่ผมคิดว่ามีความสำคัญก็คือการสร้างวัฒนธรรมที่ไม่ยอมรับการทุจริตเมื่อไหร่ก็ตามถ้าสังคมยังมองว่าการทุจริตไม่ว่าจะเล็กน้อยเป็นเรื่องปกติตรงนั้นสังคมเรากำลังมีอาการ trauma พอสมควรเราต้องเห็นว่าสังคมนี้ต้องปฏิเสธการทุจริตไม่ยอมรับการทุจริตดังนั้นคำว่า social control คือการควบคุมทางสังคมและ social sanction คือการกีดกันทางสังคมที่จะไม่ยอมรับการทุจริตให้เกิดขึ้นนั้นเป็นเรื่องสำคัญ3เรื่องนี้เป็นเรื่องใหญ่ครับที่เป็นกระบวนการที่เราสามารถควบคุมได้กระบวนการบังคับใช้กฎหมายการปรับกระบวนการที่ชัดเจนการสร้างวัฒนธรรมทางสังคมและวัฒนธรรมองค์กรเป็นเรื่องที่เราสามารถที่จะอยู่ในมือของหน่วยงานและของคนในสังคมไทยที่จะสามารถที่จะช่วยกันผลักดันซึ่งผมก็เชื่อว่าหากเราทำเช่นนี้ได้เนี่ย perception หรือการรับรู้ดัชนีการทุจริตที่ถูกสำรวจโดยองค์กรระหว่างประเทศก็จะมีการขยับตัวเราไม่สามารถไปควบคุมการให้คะแนนของ CPI ได้แต่เราสามารถสร้าง input หรือสร้างปัจจัยนำเข้าต่อระบบของการป้องกันการทุจริตได้และตัวสุดท้ายที่มีความสำคัญมากแต่ไม่รู้จะสร้างอย่างไรก็คือการสร้างสิ่งที่เรียกว่าการให้ทุกคนมี self control คือการทำให้ทุกคนรู้สึกมีระบบการควบคุมตัวเองที่จะไม่เห็นแก่ประโยชน์ส่วนตนมากเกินไปทำให้มีการใช้วิถีชีวิตแบบพอเพียงที่จะยอมรับสภาพความเป็นอยู่ไม่มีความโลภไม่มีความอยากได้ไม่มีความตะกระตะกรามต่อประโยชน์อันที่ไม่ใช่ของเราและที่สำคัญครับเราควรเอาคนเหล่านี้เป็นตัวอย่างกับสังคมเพื่อทำให้สังคมเห็นว่าคนที่มีความตั้งใจที่จะแก้ปัญหาการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันหรือดำรงตนด้วยการไม่ทุจริตคอร์รัปชันและอยู่ได้ในสังคมนี้มีอยู่จริงท่านผู้มีเกียรติครับผมคิดว่านี่คือสิ่งที่ผมอยากจะเรียนนำเสนอเบื้องต้นก่อนที่เราจะเริ่มรับฟังเพราะในโอกาสนี้ผมต้องขอขอบคุณท่านผู้เข้าร่วมสัมมนาทุกท่านนะครับในโครงการพัฒนานวัตกรรมเพื่อยกระดับดัชนีการรับรู้การทุจริตของประเทศไทยซึ่งเป็นโครงการความร่วมมือกันระหว่างสำนักงานคณะกรรมการป้องกันการปราบปรามการทุจริตคอร์รัปชันหรือปปช.ร่วมกับสถาบันพระปกเกล้าผมขอขอบคุณท่านกิริซุปราเดียโนจาก Indonesian National Police นะครับและคุณ Professor Allen Higgins จาก Variety of Democracy หรือ VDEM ที่จะมาช่วยแชร์ประสบการณ์ในการที่จะดำเนินการเพื่อช่วยกันสร้างสังคมนี้ให้เป็นสังคมที่ลดการทุจริตผมคงไม่พูดว่าปลอดเพราะว่าเป็นไปได้ยากแต่การลดหรือการยกระดับคุณธรรมยกระดับจริยธรรมยกระดับธรรมาภิบาลของสังคมก็เป็นหน้าที่ของพวกเราทุกคนครับผมก็หวังว่าการสัมมนาสาธารณะวันนี้ก็จะเกิดประโยชน์และมีข้อเสนอและมีแนวทางที่เราจะเรียนรู้แล้วก็นำมาปรับปรุงต่อการทำหน้าที่ของพวกเราที่จะยกระดับประเทศและสังคมไทยให้เป็นที่ยอมรับในนานาชาติต่อไปในโอกาสนี้ผมขอเปิดเวทีกิจกรรมเวทีสาธารณะโครงการพัฒนานวัตกรรมเพื่อการยกระดับดัชนีการเรียนรู้ รับรู้การทุจริตหรือ CPI ของประเทศไทยนะครับณบัดนี้ครับขอบพระคุณครับ
ขอบพระคุณศาสตราจารย์วุฒิสารตันชัยนะคะเลขาธิการจากสถาบันพระปกเกล้าค่ะก็ตามที่ท่านได้กล่าวเกริ่นไปนะคะวันนี้เราได้รับเกียรติจากวิทยากรต่างชาติค่ะโดยที่คุณกริสปาดิโนนะคะณปัจจุบันเนี่ยเป็น Senior Policy Expert Specialist จาก Indonesian National Police นะคะแต่ว่าในอดีตเนี่ยเคยเป็นผู้อำนวยการนะคะ Education and Public Campaign นะคะของ KPK หรือ Corruption Eradication Commission นะคะของอินโดนีเซียค่ะโดยที่เดี๋ยวเราจะเพื่อให้ทุกท่านได้รับชมนะคะเดี๋ยวเราจะขอนำคุณกริขึ้นมาแล้วก็จะขอกล่าวเป็นภาษาอังกฤษเล็กน้อยค่ะแล้วก็ย้ำอีกครั้งนะคะว่าท่านใดที่ต้องการรับชมเป็นแบบแปลภาษาสามารถกดไปยังลูกโลกนะคะแล้วก็เลือกในภาษาไทยค่ะเราจะมีล่ามแปลภาษาให้ได้ค่ะ Hello and good morning, Mr. Giri. We are so happy to have you here today. And without any further ado, I will give the floor to you now. Thank you very much.
Yes, good morning. Sawadee everybody. Yes, I do apologize that if my English is not very well, because very long time I've been speak in the international event, but I try my best, and I will start to say thank you for the committee to invite me to be guest speaker today. Honorable Professor Watisan Tanchai, Secretary General of Prajadipok Institute, Dr. Apinya Tisamana, who finally found my name from Indonesia. And I saw in the participant is my dear friends, actually my guru, Dr. Siri Laksana Koman. Good morning, Dr. Siri Laksana. Sis,
Good morning. Good morning.
morning.
Giri.
How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Haven't seen you
Yes.
for a long time.
Yeah, long time. I'm
So
already
glad to
old now,
see you.
getting
Yeah.
white.
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Silasana still with Thammasat University, or you're now is assigned for another position?
I'm a subcommittee member of the NACC,
Oh, I see.
but
Okay.
I still teach a few courses on the economics of anti-corruption at Thammasat and also at NIDA.
Okay, great. Yeah. And also good morning for
Good morning.
panelists, especially Dr. Dr. Hicken, yeah. Sorry. Yeah, Dr. Hicken, yes. Actually, it's good news and bad news for Indonesia to speak about anti-corruption, because what happened during the last 2 years is like sad stories for, especially from the KPK. So when I transferred to the police, actually, it's something happened. It's like a political things, because I've been 9 years to be directors in KPK, Anti-Corruption Commission in Indonesia, 16 years working there, and they use like a very tricky movement to fire 57 of us, including 8 chief of senior investigators, directors, DGs, etc. So it seems that this is consequence of the KPK law being revised in 2009. So I will explain it later, how important that to maintain the political commitment in anti-corruption. Otherwise, the CPI is not easy to be achieved if we are not good enough on the political commitment. So I will start my presentation. Oh, wait a moment, please. Yeah. Can you see my screen? Okay. Last week, Ms. Kao contacted me to speak about CPI, and actually this is my old memory when I'm working with KPK, but I still have several of them. So I hope it's helpful for Thai people who like to increase the CPI score. So basically, I will share you the experience on the anti-corruption. Basically, 3 understandings. One, there is no single solution in fighting corruption. So it's depend of your local wisdom, depend of the domestic law as well. And you cannot rely on single agency to fight corruption. So it's not easy being independent anti-corruption because, for example, in Indonesia, we have 3 agencies who handle corruption cases, just police, prosecutor general, and the KPK. So instead of working side by side, but sometimes it's like being a competitor as well. So the best in management of anti-corruption is supposed to be the single agency, independent, but they cannot working solitaire. They cannot working only by themselves. They have to bring other stakeholders. And the third one is CPI is not really perception. Even though the stand from the corruption perception index, actually the CPI is not perceptions, but it's the real situations and what really happened in the field. So how the businessman and also the expert assess the country. So it's not perception when we ask the respondent, oh, what do you feel? What do you think about the corruption in Thailand, for example? And people choose 1 till 10 numbers. It's not like that, but actually it's the real situation, which is very long memory, and they are usually using the same respondent, the same expert to be asked every year or every 2 years, depend of the survey. And if you read in the transparency website in 2001, this year's corruption perception then reveals that corruption levels are not worldwide standstill. So, are a worldwide standstill. So it's not much change actually. But the last 2 years is pandemics, COVID-19 pandemic, and many countries use as excuse actually to curtail basic freedom and set step important check and balance. And Indonesia also has a problem this one. Usually when the parliament would like to repress our law, KPK law, the public movement is very strong. But suddenly it's pandemic, so it's not easy to bring up people to make a movement to make a balance during the COVID pandemic. And we know how the situation the last 2 years on the pandemic. So I think it's the freedoms and also the human rights also the issue during this time. Then the anti-corruption efforts stagnate worldwide. Human rights and democracy are also under assault. So I put the quote from the country with well-protected civil liberties generally score high. On the CPI, well countries who violate civil liberties tend to score lower. So this is also findings. Dr. Sili Salana Koman have research actually with APEC, I remember in 2008, how the correlation with the CPI, with the GDP, correlation with the democracy, correlation with the another indicators. Maybe we can also share what the finding in 2008 on the CPI, also on the stock taking of the comparative study anti-corruption agency in Asia. And the score of CPI globally have average 43, where Asia Pacific 45, a little bit higher, but Thailand, Indonesia is similar. So this is the highest global CPI, Scandinavian one. Then the lowest we know that, but this is very important. This is also I found in Transparency International website that CPI is good for business. So economic implication research papers published in 2007 and 2008 examined that the economic consequences of corruption perception as defined by the CPI. The researchers found a correlation between higher CPI and higher long-term economic growth, as well as increase in GDP growth of 1.7%. for every unit, increase in a country CPI score. So if I check GDP in Thailand in 2001, you have 505.9 billion US dollar. If I use this formula, meaning that improvement 1 point of CPI index is worth it for 1.7 of GDP, or equivalent with 8.6 billion US dollar. Quite a lot actually. So the CPI improvement program is also good business actually. So there is economic reasons to increase CPI because 1 point increase meaning 1.7 GDP increase as well. So this is a very interesting finding from the researchers. What about Indonesia? Actually, if I check in the data source of the CPI index, between Indonesia and Thailand is using the same survey. None of them is the same. It is Political Risk Services, IMD Business School, World Competitiveness Yearbook, Global Insight Country Risk Ratings, World Economic Forum Executive Opinion Survey, Bertelsmann System Transformation Index, Economist Intelligence Unit Country Risk Service, Political and Economic Risk Consultancy, Varieties of Democracy Project. So Professor Deacon will be speak on this and FIDEM, and so World Justice Project on the Rule of Law Index. Thailand and Indonesia using the same survey. So we are using 9 out of 13 survey that has by the TI. So if we check the rank, Thailand rank is 110 out of 180. The score is 35. While Indonesia score is 38 and our rank is 96. So still quite low, but similar with Thailand. And we have same score with Argentina, Brazil, Turkey, Serbia, and Lesotho. And if we compare in ASEAN, so the first one of Singapore, the second one Malaysia, Timor-Leste is now is better than Indonesia. Well, they learn from us as well. Then Vietnam, then Indonesia, and Thailand is after Indonesia on the score. Well, in G20, Indonesia part of G20, Indonesia also quite low on the score compared with other members. So I think this is very challenging as well for us to speak on anti-corruption. Especially the G20 also has the working group on anti-corruption and transparency working group. I was one of the initiators in 2011 establishing the working group on anti-corruption in Jakarta with the United Kingdom during that time. So, and now as Indonesia has presidency on G20 and we have to speak on anti-corruption, but the situation is a little bit different now. It's more difficult to speak frankly about the anti-corruption in Indonesia. And I do believe why our colleagues from NICC, I believe that there are a lot of my colleagues here in NICC and also Raja Deepak to ask Indonesia to speak on CPI, because I believe these figures. Even though the final score is 38, but if we compare with Indonesia 20 years ago, 21 years ago, Indonesia has a lot of improvement. In 1999, our score is 17. Then in 2001 is 38, but we have the highest score on the 2019, which is 40. If I cut the data from 1999 until 2020, so and I will just by easy numbers, just the improvement during the 21 years. So Indonesia improvement is 20 points. Argentina 12 points, Vietnam 10 points, Nigeria 9 points, China, which is very famous with the death and capital penalty on the corruption, only increased 8. Ukraine increased 7, Thailand increased 4 during 21 years. Malaysia 0. There is no change at all. So during Mahathir Mohamad in 99, he resigned at the 50 with score of 51, and now in the score is 51. And even is lower now in 2001. But it's very interesting, the Malaysia score, how they decreased from the 2014 until 2019, and Dr. Mahathir Mohamad is win the election and run the country and just increase 6 points in 2018 until 2019. This is very important. I also invite them to share to us what is really improvement and reform during the Mahathir in 2018 and 2019. I will give you the explanation later on. But based on this score, we proudly inform you that we are better than other countries in terms of improvement, but the score is still low. But what really happened during the 21 years? Actually, the backbone, if the backbone is actually the existence of the independent anti-corruption bodies, or KPK. KPK established by law in 2002 and has commissioner in 2003, and I joined in 2005 with 100 officers there. We effectively working since 2004 actually. We handling the kids since 2004 and 2005. So it's like a very stable improvement from 19 until 40, the KPK existence, but it's dropped in 2019 due to KPK law revision, weakening the KPK. And just slightly improved in the last year, also because of the KPK scandal. That's one of the result is being transferred from the anti-corruption to the police system. If I compare with the data in the BRIC plus Indonesia, BRICI, which is Brazil, India, China, Indonesia, which is a similar in terms of geography and the economy, we also much better because we start from the we can say the lowest one. We start with 17 in 1999. But you can see from here that Brazil also even decreased from 41 to 35. China improved, as I told you before, and India, there are improvements as well. So instead of you learning from Indonesia, you may learn from India based on this chart actually. Also, you can learn from Scandinavian. Actually, they have stability on the CPS score. It's just difficult to learn actually because they are small country very well, and they have a social control very well, have a fairness and etc. But it's good to learn from the Scandinavian also. While you learn, Thailand learn from them, then I will learn from Thailand what you got from them one day. I hope Dr. Apinya will facilitate us to do as well, because we are struggling actually how to improve the CPI. So from this figure, so I made by myself, I compare with the presidencies. We were led by President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono, before is President Megawati, President Gus Dur, etc., and also during Soeharto. So if I compare the presidency, I think we have the highest improvement during the President Susilo Bambang Yudhoyono. It's plus 14. Well, during the President Jokowi, we only improved 4 actually in the 2001, or only plus until last year. But we don't know yet what really happened this year because so many happened. Political and anti-corruption cases also happened during this year. So we are not sure that this year or early of next year with our new score actually. So I think also important for Thai to compare this kind of political regime, to compare, for example, during President Thaksin, President Yingluck, etc., to know how which is better, and we compare the policy during this time. It's not for the political purpose, but for the research. What is being handled during this presidency and what they had the handling during this kind of policy. Because if we see from these pictures during the current regime is so many happen actually. So the score is not much increased, for example, because we handling the cases against the police general, for example. We are against the host of speaker. Then, but if we don't have the political scandals, which is the big, the kid, or we call it kid one. So usually the score will be slightly improved. But if there is a political happen, will be stagnant or will be slowing down or decrease, because the businessman and the expert is so sensitive this kind of political situation. This is I compare when we just revised the KPK law. Sorry, I have to move like this. So we have the KPK has powers to red-handed or catch in the act the corruption cases. So if someone is doing transaction, we red-handed, and we have a case for that. We call it with red-handed cases. It's dropped in 2019 from 21 only 7, and in 2021 only 2. So the impact of the KPK law revision is so much suffering for the KPK. And in 2001, 57 of us, the key person is being fired by the commission using the procedures. So it's very tricky, this one. So we suffer the reform, the businessman, the expert, and the respondent. It's just what I call it is, okay, this is situation in Indonesia, I give you, and the score is just drop 3 points. This is the lowest drop for Indonesia for the 22 years, the lowest one. So there is correlation actually, but even not, it's not very strong, because if we see several indicators is discussing or elaborating more on the case handle or rule of law. But if we talk about the economic one, like what economic forum something is, it's not related really with the corruption cases, but related with how the situation dealing the business actually, licensing, public services, etc. And historically, because it's not easy actually combating corruption in every part of the world. This is Indonesia. We start from the Independence Day. We established the anti-corruption, and always has it's only 10 years. The term of the anti-corruption agency only 10 years. So dismiss, establish, dismiss, establish. So learning from that, we established actually KPK. KPK is still exists till today, but last 2 years is being weakening by political movement. So from this history, what should we learn actually? Learning from the anti-corruption agency. The anti-corruption agency is not effective if they don't have enough in prevention measures actually. One of the effective prevention measures is bureaucratic reform. How to change the human resources, including the salary of the government officials. So the KPK established is quite effective, because we promote the better of the human resources, especially the salary from the government officials. But while we try to improve the political remuneration, political position, like minister, governors, mayors, etc., KPK doesn't have much powers to do that, because it depends on the parliament. So the movement, the reform is still stagnant actually. But in terms of the government salary in Indonesia now is much better, even 3 until 10 times compared with the before the KPK established. And also, this is not about salary, but the system, and also about regulation, etc. The second one, usually the anti-corruption is good only in the first several years, then corrupt after that. They try to threat of people with the powers, with the articles of the law, but finally they doing something fishy, asking bribery for the case, and etc. And the third one is perceived to be used with the certain interests, especially for the politics. So if we learn from the Philippines, it's very interesting actually. Well, the new president is usually establishing a new anti-corruption body against the previous regime. What is really happening in Philippines is really interesting for us. So if we establish the anti-corruption, but certain interests, especially the politics, is also dangerous. It's not sustainable. Then the fourth, human resources system was not for managing of performance. Why KPK is effective because we are well paid. We recruit from the professional. We are quite independent. We are not responsible to the president or the parliaments, but we are responsible to the public, and we adequate powers during the handling the cases, especially. And the last one is aim at punishment, not asset tracing or process of corruption. So asset recovery. So mostly is focus on imprisonment, but not focus on the money laundering, or focus on the process of crime, asset recovery. Because if the corruptors still have money, a lot of money, so they still can fight back. So what actually really happened in the Indonesia is a corruptor fight back. So they are using the pilots of the governments, the corruptor try to fight back in the anti-corruption movement. So what lesson learned from how to improving the CPI? The anti-corruption JJ is key actor actually. Luckily, Thailand have an NSCC, still good, and it's improved now. And I'm happy that Dr. Siri Laksana is joined the NSCC as well. And your law is not revised by the worst law like in KPK. I hope that what really happened in Thailand, it will be good news next year. So why I said this, CPI is different since 2012. Before 2010, if another country is bad news, for example, decrease the CPI, so another country take over this position. But after in 2012, it's not depend another country, but depend of your score. So it's not important that your neighbors is better or not, but if your score is good, you will have a good position. That's why I encourage Thailand to do better, even though in Indonesia it's very challenging. So in 1997, actually, why we established the anti-corruption is related with really what really happened in the economic crisis in 1997, actually, globally. Well, the IMF is very have a strong position to give the funding, actually, the loan to the government with a certain criteria. And one of the prerequisites actually is that the industry should establish the anti-corruption agency, independent anti-corruption agency. So instead of the public movement, also is because of the IMF record this. So if I compare in Asia, so we have several countries we have established in advance. For example, Singapore in 52, Malaysia in 67, Hong Kong in 74, Brunei in 82, Australia in 89. Then Pakistan, Thailand, Macau, South Korea, CVC, India, basically is like the response the global economic crisis in 97. So between NSCC Thailand and Indonesia, you were born earlier in 1999. You just born in 2003. But if I check in the website of UNODC, we have now more than 150 anti-corruption agency around the world. So what is why I said that the anti-corruption agency is the key actors, because the strategy is handled and led by the anti-corruption agency. The good strategy will be used this one. So this is actually my theory, but I try combine what really happened in Hong Kong, SAC Hong Kong and Malaysia. They're using three-prong law enforcement for the objective deterrent effect. People afraid to be corrupt. Then prevention is the objective for the people cannot corrupt. The system is too good, so cannot corrupt. And the third prong is education. let the new generation and the people dare not to corrupt. I don't want to be corrupt. Not because of I am afraid, not because I cannot corrupt, but I don't want because it's my value. So this three strategy is supposed to be as before the political commitment, under the strong political commitment. And usually it refers to strong leaders as well. And because they have strong leaders and commitment, so they will have adequate law, plus adequate resources, including money, human resources, infrastructure, and they will count the public participation as plus, as additional. Because if you're dealing with the cases without public participation, especially information, the complaint, so it's not easy to handling the corruption. So you need public participation, including in the prevention, to give some insight or recommendations how to improve the system. And also the education, part of the public participation, being part of the anti-corruption champion or agent. So if you have strategy, one the first thing you do is you have to establish strategy map actually. If you want to reduce corrupt, what do you need actually? Bit of culture, catalyze the public sector reform, gain the public trust, etc. It depend of your strategy, but you need strategy map to do this. And the strategy map supposed to be embedded in the structure of the agency and also embedded in the stakeholders actually. Because instead from the anti-corruption agency, you must be established with the second ring, which is the stakeholders actually. You may establish the anti-corruption action plan, you may be strategic plan for the anti-corruption, or presidential or prime minister instruction, etc. You need the second layers of stakeholders. And why the anti-corruption fail? There are 11, usually if the lack of political will. So actually, we are a bit worried in Indonesia because because unstable political will, then lack of resources. So the KPK is quite effective, but we don't have many human resources, especially in the investigators. The complaint we receive is 6,000 annually on the corruption cases, but our investigators is not more than 150 investigators. So it's always understaffed. Then lack of independence. The KPK law, the new one, it's actually just reduce our independence because we are part of the executive actually, while before we are auxiliary bodies. The fourth one, which fail will be wrong strategy. The strategy was I said before in the slide before is the strategy. People said that let's focus on prevention and forget on the law enforcement, etc. Which is actually the best practices is between the law enforcement, prevention, and education, they're doing the same time. Even the many agencies said that the best in prevention is the continuous and effective enforcement. So this is one of the wrong strategy that many country and agency on the anti-corruption is being happen in the several countries. And the sixth one is inadequate jurisdiction. For example, if you don't have private to private corruption law, you don't have election, well, the political party doing money politics, who can handle it, whether this is anti-corruption agency or another commission. Well, in Hong Kong, for example, the election crime is handled by the ICAC Hong Kong. Foreign bribery, etc. The seventh one is lack of public credibility and support, actually. If you are being distrusted by the public, so it's not easy, or not easy at all. So how much you try to be better, it's not easy if the public is not distrust you. Then the number 8 is lack of coalitions. Number 9 is corrupt judiciary, special law enforcement agency. The 10 was lack of professional staff. The 10 is lack of internal control. This is the overview when KPK, the old KPK law actually, but now being revised. So how effective actually the old KPK law, the previous law? The first one is we got 100% conviction rate. This is, I believe, only one in the world. 100% conviction rate within 16 years. And we handle big fish one. We arrest 257 member of parliaments. We arrest the minister level is 28 of them, governors 21, judges 22, mayor set of region is 119, etc. So this is very powerful and very strong. That's why during 2019, that's why weakening this kind of action. Actually. But if I'm criticized, by criticize what really happened in the commission is we forgot to spend much time to handling the judicial corruption and law enforcement integrity. So it's a bit different what really happened in Hong Kong and Malaysia and Singapore when they focus on the judicial corruption and law enforcement integrity first rather than to the hiring officials. For the KPK, we are successful handling the hiring officials, but we have less. It's supposed to be more actually handle the judicial corruption and law enforcement integrity. But it's not easy. It's not like say by words, but because we dealing with, for example, the police cases, we will got fight back. If we're dealing with cases handled by, for example, law enforcement agency, also usually a fight back. Okay, I skip this one. This is one of the, for example, we red-handed chief of constitutional court. We also arrest the House of Speakers, so many of them, but the students around the nation is make a movement, this one, to against the KPK law revision. Even 5 of them is dies. It's really sad news, this one. And also movement against the omnibus law because it's like a more is not violating. It's like another way of the open government. They try to be close. When the law will be put under one, but actually they will give more the executive to govern or to establish the new president's regulation, etc. This is when the KPK revision happened. Like for example, when I was young, actually I am still young as well. We make a movement. This is the last part of my presentation. Miss Konkau, Miss Kau, how many minutes I have time now?
You still got about 20 to 30 minutes
20,
more.
20, okay, yeah. So I continue. Okay. This is the important one for our discussion this morning. How to deal with the CPI actually. What I mentioned before is why the KPK, the Indonesian CPI dropped in 2020 actually, and also how lessons ending the political commitment. So if we check in Transparency International, the corruption perception index actually is based on the 13 of the survey. And for Thailand and Indonesia, using the same survey. For example, Bertelsmann will be covering 137 countries, Economic Intelligence Unit 121 countries, then IMD 60 countries, PRC 15 countries. This is very interesting what really happened in 15 countries. The only 15 countries included in the PRC survey, and this is Indonesia's lowest score is in this survey as well. So it's not easy. And when I check, it's based on the one question actually. What do you think about the corruption in Indonesia? So it's not easy to improve this survey. And another survey, for example, but Economic Forum, etc., is also usually is more than 100 countries. So Thailand and Indonesia using 9 out of 13. We are using the same survey, this one. So like Indonesia, we improve on the World Economic Forum, 6 points. We improve also quite a lot, listen, 12 points on global inside country risk rating. Also improve in the IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook from 40 to 44. meaning that actually a CPA improvement in Indonesia is based on the economic or business situation, economic indicators. But we have very low on the political corruption and democracy, and also lower in the rule of law indexes. This is little bit different with the Thailand. Okay, I check Thailand first. This I compare the data Thailand and Indonesia. Thailand is in the yellow one. You're better in terms of rule of law index actually. You got better score in the Bertelsmann Foundation Transformation Index. You better on the PRC. You better on the FIDEM. Your FIDEM score is 26, while Indonesia's score is 22. Then with Justice Project Rule of Law Index, you also much better than Indonesia. Indonesia score is 23. Thailand score is 35. So if we see from this table, actually Indonesia strength is on the economic indicators. We have very high, for example, on the economic rating. So this is the consequence actually, but we need to do research this one, whether there's the relaxation, or I call it with the loss of the anti-corruption regime, also on the impact of the CPA, or also the business environment actually. So if we compare from this one, actually, what you really need in Thailand is to improve on the economic rating. This is actually is more easier rather than on the rule of law index, or on the political corruption. I believe that what really happened in Thailand is better than Indonesia during the last 2 years at least. So that's why the score on this in this survey is indicate that you are better on the rule of law index and political corruption. I'm back again from this. Learning from the Indonesian score, we have the score because only slightly increased from 37 to 38, but actually we decreased for 40. We have problems with the human rights and democracy issue. The second one is on the anti-corruption institution, the beginning of the KPK, by using the revise of KPK law. Then also the issue of proceeds of crime and transnational crime. Also the issue on the open government actually. So the COVID and the pandemic let the government using the excuse for the more close on the, for example, the procurement from the health sectors, for example, buying the masks, buying the vaccine, etc. So the pandemic also jeopardizing the open government. Even though actually it's the technology replacing the government, but the procurement still have a challenge on this issue. So in Indonesia score, our score on the business indicators, GI World Economic Forum (MD) is increased 12, 7, and 1, and we have the same score with the last year on the AU, PRC, and World Justice Project, but we very low score on the PRS, FIDEM, and BFDI. So actually there are three issues, right? Business indicators, rule of law indicators, and political indicators. And if we check in Indonesia, why the political corruption is so much happen, because the roots is we have the system that very high cost politics, very high. The election in Indonesia is 100 yearly, annually 100, because we have direct election in every provinces, in every mayors and cities, and we have 150 cities, plus more than 35 provinces, plus the central government, parliament, and the presidents. So can you imagine the country, the state fund also using for the election and maintain the democracy in Indonesia is very high. And we choose the political system is the open political system, while the decision is by the voters. If you have money more, if you have more populars, you will be chosen. not depend on your position and a political party. The second one, that the political corruption rules, is the absence of the state support, which is funding, because there is very low the funding from the government for political party. And also bad rewarding from the politicians, especially salary for them, governors, mayors, minister is quite low in the salary. So this is actually one of the challenge for Indonesian reform to improving the rewarding for the politician position. I believe what really happened in Thailand, the Philippines, is we have similar situation where the government salary usually is quite low, or maybe it's not market it's not I mean it's quite low compared with the private sectors. So it's not they're forced to hire professional staff. It's not easy. You have low salary. And the worst one is they will be corrupt using the powers. So if we see from this table, actually, this is depend on your strategy, the Thailand strategy. Whether you will focus on the strength. For example, Indonesian strength is on the economic indicators. To improve the economic indicators is easy for Indonesia. While to improve in the weakest one, which is political corruption, on the human right, on the rule of law index, very difficult. You see from the scores, 2001 even is we got lower on the FIDEM from 26 to 22. For Justice Project, just stable but still low. PRC also stable but still low. Bettersman also rule of law index also decreased from 37 to 30. So improving the weakest link is very important, triggering the higher score, but the most difficult one. Because the issue is rule of law. How to maintain the integrity, for example, the police around the nation. How to maintain the corruption in the bureaucracy. How to zero tolerance for the money politics, for example. So it's not easy. So it depends whether you will touch both of them, focus on the strength or the weakest one, or you choose one, because usually we have limited resources actually. For example, NICC to focus on, for example, whether to focus on the strength. It depends on your strategy actually. So the next strategy, you have to know what is really actually the indicators, what the surveys. You have to scrutinize what is the survey. So you will know the objective of the survey, what is the main question, the source data you set, and how to make a score of this, and also who's the respondent. This is very important. The respondent is very important, not to find them personally. Otherwise, you will bribe them. Give me score, I will bribe you. So you will have a better anti-corruption score. It's not like that. But you know what is actually, whether this is expert, or this is the public, or this is the businessman, whether this is multinational businessman, you have to know this. Then the next one is you have to know the timing of data collection. When they will collect, which month, every year. The next one is who do the research, the survey researchers. So for example, FIDEM actually is handled by University of Gothenburg and University of Notre Dame, for example. And research handled by 3,000 I call it from the Department of Politics of Gothenburg, etc. So you have to know about this. If you don't know the indicators, if you don't know the details of the indicators, so it's not easy to do intervention. Even for myself, when I have this strategy, it's not easy. And sorry, I haven't translated this one. I don't have time to translate it. But the message is you have to learn what is the survey itself actually. And this is I would like to share what we got from Malaysia, how to improve 6 points during Mahathir. and I interviewed them. Then I got this one, Malaysia Reborn of the Mahathir running the country. The first one is establishing policy center of anti-corruption. They call it GICC. This policy and this institution is like become the key persons just next of the prime minister to give advice and on the anti-corruption policy actually. And it has been led by the former chief of MICC, Dato Abu Qasim, and he is very good as well. So there's quite a lot of improvement. The second one is strengthening MICC because it was weakening during one MTP cases by appointing former senior officers. So the former officers, they being recalled back, and also several senior officers become minister in Malaysia. So the third one, establishing rule of politicians could not or forbidden to be like commissioners or to be management, especially commissioners on the government-related company and state-owned company. The fourth one is asset declaration and reverse burden to prove on the asset declaration. The fifth one, establish corruption risk management in every government and state-owned company by deploying integrity officers. So you can learn from this one. And the last one is law enforcement against big fish actually, because actually they also recognize, and the businessmen will also note also the expert that okay, Mahathir is running the 1MDB cases. So this is the public trust. So this is also, so we can learn from Malaysia instead of Indonesia. And you can develop actually the program depend of the strategy that you choose, whether we discuss the weakest on the strength, but the program supposed to be on the short term, mid term, and long term. Actually, for the political issue, for example, political system amendment is long term, criminal justice system is long. But if you want to increase the CPI next year, at least you need 2 years, because most of the surveys happen early of year, every year, March, April, May, June, etc. So you need to in-depth study on CPI. The second one, policy brief on the decision maker on the CPI improvement. Then make an action plan development, and don't forget to doing low-hanging fruits for the implementation of program. Find the easy one, then visualize it and use media handling actually, because the businessman and the expert, they have to catch up what really happened in the last situation to fill the questionnaire, right? So you need to media handling, you need visualization, and doing low-hanging fruits. People cannot wait for this one. And for the midterm, maybe it depends on your situation. This is, for example, when I do with my team, when I was in police the last several months, we make a spot check in the custom department. So we check how the integrity in the custom, for example, and this one. This is to ensure the export and import, the integrity and the integrity of anti-corruption, integrity and anti-corruption is also in the custom exercise as well. So we check, for example, the container, the export and import, how we enforce to using scanning containers, etc. Then finally, we try to prevent the smuggling as well. So this is, instead of improving the country revenue, also to make a action plan with them, stakeholder review, to improve by themselves actually, because you're using software which is prevention. Then this is the last one. I think for the KPK, you may read this one. This is worse. This is worse. I cannot worse because we were strong, but not sure for today. But this is lesson learned, political commitment. This one is independent of anti-corruption agencies and public NGO media support, including international support, and the critical professional of the personnel and IT support. This is for the agency. But overall for the country, the major challenge is inconsistency in supporting of the anti-corruption movement, political will, willing to take part in corrupt mechanism so as long as they benefit from it. It's not easy. So in the politics is opportunist. In the politics is there is no permanent friends. So it's inconsistency. It's not easy. That's why we need leaders. Second one is low remuneration system and lack of human resources management and public officials. So if you not improve this system, it's not easy to improving the integrity and the system. You cannot just don't corrupt and without you changing the how much the take home pay from the, for example, how they're dealing with the human resource system, how they're doing flexible time for the human resources, etc. And the third one is law integrity of law enforcement and public officials. And this is the one of the major challenge for the police, especially. I'm now working with the police, give the advisory directly to the chief of national police. And it's not easy because like Indonesian police force is now at 430,000. Can you imagine? It's very big, very strong. And the salary is not too high and the burden is so much because they're working almost 24 hours. I think similar with Thailand also in the army. Then the fourth one is corruptor fight back, like KPK revision, etc., including being transfer now. I'm supposed in the KPK, but I'm being transferred last year. Then internal oversight system is weak. Then the last one is government administrative system prone to corrupt. So this is very important. And I thank you for your time and ขอบคุณครับ สวัสดีครับ ready for discussion นะครับ thank you
Thank you ค่ะ and ขอบคุณค่ะ for the insight, the experience and all the information today ตอนนี้ก็ต้องขอบคุณคุณปรีลีนะคะที่มาแชร์ประสบการณ์แล้วก็เขาเรียกว่าความรู้องค์ความรู้จากของ KPK แล้วก็ของประเทศอินโดนีเซียที่เคยได้ทำมาแล้วก็มีการประสบความสำเร็จมาโดยตลอดนะคะแล้วก็คิดว่าหวังว่าในอนาคตเนี่ยจะขยับค่าคะแนน CPI เพิ่มขึ้นไปนะคะจากตัว policy แล้วก็การวิเคราะห์ทั้งตัวภายในองค์กรแล้วก็ของตัว CPI เองนะคะตอนนี้จะเปิดโอกาสให้ผู้รับชมรับฟังหรือแม้แต่ทางผู้ชมจากทางไลฟ์เองค่ะสามารถที่จะสอบถามเข้ามาได้นะคะว่ามีคำถามอยากจะเปิดข้อคิดเห็นอะไรกับคุณกฤษนะคะ so now we will open about like 20 minutes for Q&A session or discussion session okay we got Dr. Pinyaนะคะ I will put her on spotlight
hello yeah you hear me yes really yes I have yeah, as you mentioned that about the CPI in Indonesia and Thailand is very useful and useful information for anti-corruption in Thailand. That's as you mentioned, that's very high cost politics in Indonesia. In my opinion, KPKs can reduce the anti-corruption in Indonesia, especially in red hand cases. And I think that KPK in Indonesia is very freedoms and neutrals, my opinion. KPK, that is the important thing that KPK aware about democracies and anti-corruption issue is like the same poise and same important issue to resolve this problem together. Yeah, it's like important the democracy and anti-corruption is the same. It's the same issue, but because it's politicians in your country and it's prone to anti-corruption is the same in Thailand also. But it is a great, big problem in Thailand and Indonesia also. But I have one question for you. That's in the last slide, and that you showed us the lesson learned and more challenges in the anti-corruption in Indonesia. But what is the important mechanisms for anti-corruption in Indonesia? That it's with integration in many institutes and or in the public sector or private sector. But I would like to know more deeply what is the more important mechanisms in Indonesia for anti-corruption in the country. Thank you very much.
Dr. Apinya, so basically your question is actually what KPK doing during the improvement of CPI, right? Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay, okay.
during-
So why we make a differences actually? Why?
yes,
Because
okay.
KPK, yeah.
But
Yeah.
maybe in my questions, except the KPK or in the border institutions or the network CSO network in Indonesia, we have the collaborations to reduce the anti-corruption in the Indonesia also.
Yeah.
Is this like a strong mechanisms in Indonesians? Is
Mm.
something like that, or
Yeah.
or KPK is this a strong institutions? This has like a outstanding institution for reduce the anti-corruption in Indonesia. But
Yeah.
I would like to know, is this a strong? What is the strong mechanism in your country to
Okay.
reduce the anti-corruption? Yeah.
Actually, KPK since beginning aware that there is we cannot handle the anti-corruption by us alone actually. So we established actually strategic plan for the anti-corruption, which is joint collaboration between the President's office and also the National Planning Agency to establish like long-term actually, at least 5 years of the anti-corruption program. So this is to bring a lot of stakeholders actually. For the prevention issue, it's not the issue. So it's fine actually, because they happy when said your salary is better, you got better salary, they will happy. Okay, you change the system. But the problem is we handling the cases actually. So most of our cases is and is against the political exposed person actually. Can you imagine 20 administrators, 21 governors, more than 250 member of parliament? So actually, what really happened? The reason behind actually the revision, actually the fight back is because KPK cases is not make the political person is happy actually. And the second one actually is our mandate is not only from the PEP, political exposed person and the rank officer, but the law enforcement. If we learn from how the Hong Kong, Singapore, and Malaysia handling the corruption cases, they are focused on the law enforcement agencies. That's why if you check the cases handled by the Hong Kong, Singapore, for example, most of the cases is on the police cases, on the custom investigator or another law enforcement agencies, because they are focused on the integrity of judicial system actually. But when we try to apply this strategy in Indonesia, it's not work. We got fight back. The first case actually in the police is fight back so much for KPK. Even 2 of our commissioner also being suspected by the police, right? And this is series, not only once. When we against them, we got fight back. So we need the leaders on this kind of situation, because the commission using the task is not enough, but you need the support, political support, not only the resources, but really the support. If you you doing a good job, so the responsible supposed to be by the leaders, right? On the Lee Kuan Yew, for example, pick up the CPIB Singapore. On the Mahathir Mohamad, pick up the MICC. We need this kind of support actually. It's not only by the powers, but the political. So the political leaders supposed to be create the environment to support this kind of anti-corruption. And it's not easy, because when you born in the situation where the politics is very high cost, and the oligarchs, the oligarchs, how the entrepreneurs, how in the tycoon it's like a become one with the governments and the decision makers. So we have this kind of situation. It's not easy. So it's not the issue of we working with others or not, but actually the issue when we are doing a good job, so you will got trouble for the anti-corruption. But this is what I call it is the proper like the proper mission, right, for everyone to do this one. I think it's not easy to do this one. Let's see what really happened the next 4 years. And then another program actually we also dealing with the private sectors. So I handle this one. So how bring the corporate criminal liability in the program? So the private sector not only doing the prevention side, not become the object of the legal person in the cases, but also if they could not establish the system, the prevention system within their corporations. So it will be easy for the judges that you have violated the law. So you liable, your corporation liable for the criminal action. So we need to establish corporate criminal liability. And also, actually, KPK got a lot of support from the public. We got so much support from them. So we got very easy information. So most of the cases is not from the interception technology, for example, we intercept by phone telecommunication, but mostly came from the people, ordinary people who trust the commission actually. The secretary, the driver who saw his boss doing the money changer, etc. So this is the trust. So how, for example, to build the trust within the public is very important, and we need to be trustful. The agency will be trustful. It's not easy. Especially the current commissioner, because one is now resigned because of violate the ethic. The chief also was violated 5 ethics, but now it's become chief of commissioner. So I think the public distrust is so much now, even is lower than police now. Police is much higher compared with the commission at the moment.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
ขอบคุณค่ะ Dr. Pinya. Thank you, agree for the answering the first question. We have another one from คุณสิริลักษณานะคะ
Yeah. It's my teacher.
Sawadika. Yes, thank you very much for your presentation, Giri. It's nice to see you again. I have one comment and 2 questions, if that's okay. One comment, my first comment is that you mentioned political support and the importance of political will. You know, to me, you might remember that to me, I feel that we have to construct the anti-corruption, infrastructure, anti-corruption system in spite of political will. We cannot rely on them to have political will. And so we have to have a system that will work even though the political will is absent. I know it's extremely difficult because if we have the political will, a lot of problems can be solved quite easily, I think. So our task is to design a system whereby the political will is absent, but we can prevent and we can prosecute corrupt acts anyway. Well, that's my comment. My 2 questions are, first of all, you mentioned that there was a revision in the Kapika law that resulted in the drop of the CPI. Could you elaborate on what changes were made to the law that resulted in this drop in the CPI? That's my first question. The second question is that you mentioned IT support. To me, I think the use of IT, the use of technology is extremely important. And so I'd like to know what kind of support. To me, the most serious kind of corruption is the corruption that's perpetrated by a network of corrupt people. And in this network, you might have as high as the, minister, prime minister, the procurement agent, official, as well as the private sector, that they form this network. The problem is that they are very clever at disguising their connections. So if we can use IT to find this connection of the network, who is a member of the network, because in Thailand, we have a lot of problem with nominees. They use other people's names. Now, if we can establish using, IT technology to establish that these nominees are in fact part of this corrupt network, that would help us a lot. And in terms of the connections, the tracing of the money flow, that would help a lot because we have hard evidence. And as you know, corrupt cases, we cannot rely so much on witnesses because witnesses can be bought, witnesses can lose their memory. Corruption cases take a long time to conclude. And so I'd like to know what elements of IT technology is used in Indonesia. Thank you very much, Gary.
Yeah. Okay. You have one comment and two questions. I agree with your statement, the first one. And of course, I think assuming we running anti-corruption without political commitment. So this is very important. Actually, I've been initiated with UNODC in 2011 when we established Jakarta Principle on the Anti-Corruption Agency. So the principle adopted now is by ICA and also recognized by UN as well. It's like the fundamental to establishing the anti-corruption agency, remuneration, professionalism, independence, etc. So I hope this is the international instrument can being the infrastructure for the country, not depend on the political. But frankly speaking, it's not easy at all. It's not easy. The successful country always got the backup the political. Okay, I will answer on the two questions. The first one is what the changes, the law changing, and the second about the IT. The change of the law. The first one is KPK become part of the executive.
Oh.
Yeah. So it's like
Terrible.
the ordinary. Yeah. And second one is the officers, KPK officers become the common government officials.
Wow.
Yeah, it's not
so no longer independent.
Yeah, and they use these articles to what to select it doing something picky. So 50 of 7 of us is not pass the exam for being government officer. So it is tricky using the procedures to what I call it, to fabricating the corruption feedback, using procedures. So they make exam for us, civic exam, and they said, and they choose the key persons is not pass the exam.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow, and it happened last year. So even myself also part of the not pass the exam. Even though 2 months before the exam, I am the best director in the nation on the command course, but that's not the pass the exam. So but this is so they are so smart. The corrupt are so smart. Then the third ones, they changed that KPK could stop the cases. When the previous law, we could not stop the cases. When the cases is under open investigation, so we could not stop. But now they can stop the cases. The third one, the powers of commissioners is now doesn't have powers on being prosecutor and investigators. So before it says commissioner has power prosecutor and investigators. Then we could not establish the branches. KPK only one in the capital. This is the new law set.
Wow.
Oh, so many of them. We have 26. If I explain
Wow.
to you, it's not good actually. So many happen, and I think the smart way of them is just make the civic action to eliminate the key person. So
Wow.
it's like a takeover by the politics. So it's really bad news.
Mm.
Okay, if you, I will give my context, or you got my context. So if you need more details on the changes, the revisions, I will give you later.
Okay.
And the second
Thank you.
question on the IT. IT usually used for the special investigative technique, right? Red-handed, doing interception, etc. But now it's people more smart using the social media, nominee, and the money laundering now uses using the crypto one. It's not easy. Not easy at all for this one, even by myself to understanding. The old man may be using the casino for money laundering, but now they are using the crypto. It's not easy at all. So you have to hire the one who the expert on this one, especially in the IT expert and the millennials and the young generation one. Including now is how to handle the nominee actually. Therefore, you need the the law or regulation on the nominee or beneficial ownership actually. BO, beneficial ownership.
Yeah.
So because the covers or the nominee will be violated the law if we have the beneficial ownership law. And for the purpose of the handling, for example, the corruption, for example, the technology is very fast now. And not only law enforcement has powers to intercept, because now like technology, for example, Pegasus and etc., it's not just intercept the certain line, but will take over your mobile phone, your apps, and so take over at all. Can you imagine if the corruptor has money and this has a power? They will take over of you, including how to control the law enforcement agents. So you have also should control this kind of devices actually, because it's very powerful. Supposed to be for the law enforcement agency, but if using for another way, will be very dangerous. And I think because if we see the trends that the corruptors now is not only the old person but also the young one. Now we handle the cases which is the age of the corruptors on the 20s or 30s one, and quite a lot of money there. Meaning that the corruptors' habits is not belong of the old persons of the baby boomers, but also belong of the millennial and the X generation and Y generation as well. You need to bring more young generation on the anti-corruption. Bikin part, maybe they are hackers, maybe the IT expert, or maybe so. Because if we have the hacker, the expert, you should have the regulation to protect them to do this job as well. This is my question. I do apologize if my question is not answered.
Thank you very much, Giri.
Yeah, glad to meet you. I'm so happy.
คุณสิริลักษณะนะคะ we still have one more question from คุณมัทนาค่ะ
Hello ค่ะ Hello I have two questions to ask you. First of all, what is the roles and factor leading to the success of rise CPI score? And second, what advice would you give to the country with low CPI score such as Thailand? Thank you.
Okay, actually our score is similar, right? So I'm not your teacher, but you should learn from Indonesia. If you want to accelerate your CPI, you have to learn in detail what is CPI survey, timing, what is the respondent, what I told you in the table, right? You have to understand this one, because people talking of a lot of about CPI, but they don't understand what really CPI. Even you asking, for example, in Transparency International in Thailand or Indonesia, you asking for details, sometimes they don't know. Because of the raw data, usually they barely. Or maybe they buy a data from the research center or institute. So what I know is that TI also buy the raw data from the third party, and they choose several indicators being part of the CPI score, the composite indicators. So you have to learn this one. So there is no prescriptive or so you have to learn which survey you try to focus, for example, to prioritize which one. And you have to learn, you have to know that the respondent of the CPI is mostly multinational businessmen, well-recognized persons, the expert, also the analyzed persons. They're not the person who easily being cooptation, yeah, not easy being changed their mind. They have their own right and decision and they're very independent. So don't try to change them or bribe them, but you have make impression of them. Media handling, for example, the signal is important, meaning that, oh, look at this, Mahathir handling the 1 MPP case. This is the signal. Even though the case is not finished and it's not final and binding in the court, but the signal that the case is handled properly and the statement from the leaders, this is enough for changing the perception and the decision of the respondent. So be careful. CPI is respondent is very independent. Don't try to bribe them or try to cope them. Very independent. So, and you have to choose whether you choose economic as the priority to expedite the score, or rule of law, or maybe depend of your resources actually. But I would suggest using the Pareto optimum. So choose the easy one, depend of your resources, but they have the biggest impact. I don't know what in Thailand, or maybe what is the, if I do this one, so the impact. So you have to establish the theme to improve the CPI score. So it's not just handled by NSCC, but the NSCC also established special like a maybe steering committee or maybe the special team on it, which is the main task is to improve the CPI score. Then the suggestion for Thailand, actually, I don't know the situation because I'm not the Thai analyst, so I cannot answer you on the second question. But learning from my previous experience how to deal with the CPI, most of the anti-corruption agency think that by handling the cases will be give higher impact. In fact, not. So the daily corruption is sometimes is more impactful. For example, if the businessman dealing with the licensing in the forestry, licensing in the business, licensing the export import, maybe try to extend the licensing passport in the immigration, etc. This is give the impact because the respondent is the one who feel directly. It's not the case the minister handled by the NSCC, handled by the KPK. Maybe this is from far from their life, daily life. But you should deal with the daily life. That's why rule of law index in Indonesia is difficult because, for example, the police corrupt, then the judge prosecutor corruption in the low level, it still happen there. Petty corruption, traffic police, for example, receiving the tips, etc. So it still happen there. So to change this kind of this situation is we need the big reform, right? It's not only salary but big reform. Whether it's a long explanation to say about the reform itself. But basically, just don't focus much on only on the entertainment issue, which is the big cases, but you also focus on the daily life cases. And the hardest part is political corruption, frankly speaking. This is my answer.
Right. Thank you for Mr. Guri. So we still have time left for one more question. I would like to invite Kun Pasitนะคะ for discussion and question ค่ะ
Hello, Mr. Suprationo.
Hello,
I have-
Sawasdi Krab. Yeah.
That you mentioned that anti-corruption agency is the key success and the key factor, right?
One of them, yes.
Yeah. And I would like to know about, could you tell us about the role of the media, social media, or public participation in Indonesia?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So actually, anti-corruption agency is the key actors because the ACA has the main task to enforce the law, to prevent the law, to educate the people. And when they try to dealing with this kind of task, they maybe use several arts, right? I call it art. Using social media is art dealing the strategy. Maybe digital campaign. You should use this one because the old person like me maybe just put the advertisement, public advertisement, don't corrupt in the ballyho in the street, right? Put in the television. It's not working because the young generation is not watching the television anymore. They're using Instagram, not Facebook. Facebook is only about the old person as well. We have to choose, or whether we choose the influencer, for example. Influencer mostly using Twitter, right? If you want to fighting, doing the political thing, go to the Twitter. But if you want to saying the good things, happy, go to Instagram, right? But so it's depend of the social media that you will choose. But this is very important. What I said is very important. When we have to adapt the situation. So the pandemic changed a lot, changed quite a lot in the digital things. And I do believe what Dr. Silaksana Koman said, that the corrupt practice can be reduced by the digitalization. And for the digitalizations, if we talk about the data, instead of protected, you have to be like a database actually. The big data usually is belong of the company, corporation people, but now it's supposed to be belong of the government. So all of the services supposed to be monitored. Like if you have one identity numbers, for example, Conco have 10 numbers. So all the loan, the banking, the licensing, all the things will be related with this number. So you will easily control, including the well, if you want to do investigation. Also, if we see is the score, social score, for example, you got a ticket violated the traffic licensing, for example. That you see in the YouTube that the China also has the score of the persons by CCTV. Konkao is B, they got 98 score. Dr. Silaksana got 98, for example. By having this social scores, it actually is integrity too, whether they pay the loan in the right time, whether they violate the law, whether they are not queuing in the public transportation, all have the scores. So by having this kind of digital, so actually it's easy for law enforcement and also for for the anti-corruption. So if before the IT only using for dealing with the investigation, we can use the IT algorithm, for example, algorithm to choose the customer, for example. I want to young generation in the elementary school, this age, from this year to this year, living in the cities, they will like the Korean style. They're using algorithm to educate or to doing the prevention. So in Indonesia, we have very good story on the railway system. The train system in Indonesia compared with 15 years ago is much better. I think the best reform in Indonesia is railway and transportation system in Indonesia. One of the strategy is digitalization payment, digitalization system, and there are a lot of reform there. I think is if you want to learn, I think one of the best parts is reform on the railway system in Indonesia. Thank you very much.
ขอบคุณคุณพสิทธิ์นะคะสำหรับคำถาม Thank you,คุณพสิทธิ์ for the question, and thank you again, Mr. Giri, for sharing with us the experience and knowledge from Indonesia. It was really valuable, and we would definitely be sure to bring that and implement it into Thai context in somehow. And so, thank you again. And without further ado, I would like to introduce our next session. So the next session will be by Mr. Professor Alan Picken นะคะก็คือในเซสชันต่อไปนะคะเราจะเป็นการแลกเปลี่ยนความรู้ประสบการณ์ต่างประเทศจากกรณีศึกษาของ Variety of Democracy หรือจาก BDEM นะคะโดยที่วันนี้เราได้รับเกียรติจากวิทยากรต่างชาตินะคะ Professor Alan Picken นะคะจาก University of Michigan ค่ะแต่ว่าก็ดำรงตำแหน่งเป็น Project Manager ในประเด็นเรื่องของ Party and Party System นะคะของ BDEM เช่นเดียวกันนะคะเดี๋ยวเราจะขอเชิญMr. Alan Picken ขึ้นมาพูดในวันนี้นะคะ Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Yeah.
Pleasure to be
Okay,
here.
the sound is all right. Okay, I will leave the floor to you now. Thank you again.
Okay, are you able to see my screen okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Let me just get that going here. There we go. Okay. So it is really a pleasure to be here with my friends at KPI and other friends in Thailand today, and appreciated Secretary General's opening remarks and Mr. Giri's masterclass really on thinking about how to combat corruption. This is a problem in every country around the world, and certainly something that I know many good people in Thailand are working to combat in Thailand. I just wanted to I guess emphasize that I'm here as a not as a representative of VDEM. I've worked on VDEM for many years. I've been a project manager as she said, but I'm not here as an official in my official capacity as any part of VDEM. But I have been involved with VDEM from the very start, and again work as a manager for political parties and party systems. So coming at it from that perspective, I thought first it might just be helpful to just as I was listening to Dr. Giri, just jotting down some things that stood out to me as really helpful lessons for other countries from the Indonesian experience. These are not the only lessons, but some that jumped out to me. So one is that good institutions trump or is more important than good people. So sometimes when we hear people talk about corruption reform, rooting out corruption, there's a tension on finding the right people, kundi, right? Pudi, if we find the right people, then corruption will go away. And I think the Indonesia case was really a good illustration that what we need to do is get the institutions and the systems right. And not rely on those being filled with good people. So good institutions will help keep bad people from acting badly and allow good people to act in ways that we like. So focusing on the institutions, I think the Indonesian case sort of helps us understand that that's really what's important. He also gave us many things about how anti-corruption institutions can function. Lots of lessons there. Some that sort of jump out to mind. Independence. So Indonesia does independence and autonomy Indonesia does the best when the Counter-Corruption Commission, the KPK, is independent and active, and its score begins to decline. Its anti-corruption fight weakens once that independence begins to be challenged and undermined in profound ways. I like the sort of the tri focus on enforcement, prevention, and education. So these are sort of three legs of the stool, and if we only have one or two of those legs, we're not going to be as effective or stable. And then the importance of marrying an effective anti-corruption institution with an independent judiciary, whether it lives inside of the anti-corruption institution or outside. There has to be that independence and the lack of corruption within the judiciary, as he mentioned. The other thing to sort of note, and this is just maybe a different way of saying something he said, anti-corruption commissions are always going to disproportionately focus on incumbents. So I raise that for two issues. So first, sometimes you'll hear incumbents complain that this is unfair, right? That why should they be? There's lots of corruption. Why should they be the focus? Why should they always be the ones being focused on by anti-corruption commissions? And the answer there is in part just because that's where the power and that's where the money is, right? Those in power are the ones who have the most opportunities to abuse that power, and so they're going to be the focus of anti-corruption commissions. But it's also important to keep this in mind because because as Mr. Geary mentioned, there's going to be pushback from incumbents, right? Those who have the power are going to try and use that power to limit the reach, the effect, the power of anti-corruption commission and their allies. And so anti-corruption reformers want to be aware of that and prepared for that and ready to respond to that pushback. And then finally, I wholeheartedly echo Mr. Geary's invitation to understand things like CPI and what goes into it, how things are measured, what the different components are, who the respondents are, these business people, is this the public, is this experts, who's doing what within the CPI. Completely agree. We also, as we're doing that though, don't want to focus so much on the symptoms that we forget the underlying disease. So just as an analogy, if I have a fever, that fever is telling me something that's wrong, and I can treat the fever, but if I only treat the fever, that's going to be a problem, right? I want to understand what's causing the fever. I want to understand that I have, COVID, or I have, an inflamed appendix, or whatever it is that's causing me to be that fever. I want to understand that cause, not just the indicator or the symptom of that underlying factor. So focus on understanding the CPI, but as a way to get to better understand what the causes of corruption are, the origins of corruption are, the sources of corruption are, rather than just the symptoms of that corruption. Okay, so I'm here to talk today about the reason that we're all together here is to sort of desire to better understand corruption in Thailand, and specifically Thailand's ranking on Transparency International's corruption index. This is last year's report from 2021. The new one will be out soon. And remember that on CPI, higher numbers are better. And we can see Thailand's score here, 35 out of 100. Its rank is 110 in the world. It's declined a little bit since the year before. And on the right here, you can see Thailand's chart over time. Ups and downs, not tons of movement between sort of 35 and 38 over the last few years. We do see a kind of decline since 2015, a kind of decline in Thailand's score over the last sort of decade or so. So just to reiterate something that again Mr. Geary said, the CPI is actually quite complex. It's not one source. They've very much tried to get a holistic picture of what corruption looks like at lots of different levels: economic corruption, rule of law, political corruption. And I want to just emphasize again that I'm not an expert on the CPI. There's other people who can talk better about how they put these things together. And I'm not an expert in all these sources, but I can speak to the varieties of democracy, and that's what I want to focus on. This is one of the sources that the CPI uses. So I was asked today to come and talk a bit more about the varieties of democracies, VDEM, what it is, how to understand it, as a way to better understand also CPI. So what is VDEM? VDEM is the goal of VDEM. First thing to remember is, or to understand, that VDEM's primary purpose is not to measure corruption, right? VDEM comes out of an international effort to better understand the causes and the consequences of democracy and autocracy. So we know that regime types, so whether you're democratic or autocratic or somewhere in between, we know that that's going to shape lots of things, going to affect lots of things we care about. Everything from economic development, interstate war and peace, civil war, health, welfare, quality of life, ethnicity or ethnic identities, nationalism, class conflict, group or gender equality or inequality. And it's front and center with things like the Arab Spring, color revolutions, democratic backsliding around the world. And we know that again, these things matter a lot. And we also know that domestic and international agencies invest a lot at home and abroad at trying to support democracy, improve democracy and governance, improve respect for human rights. Billions are spent every year on these things. And yet, it's sometimes hard to figure out, do these things work? Or do they actually have any effects? And part of the challenge is that it's hard to define things like democracy or autocracy, hard to measure these things, and there's disagreement about how to measure these things. So there's lots of existing measures of democracy. I won't go through these all, but some of the most well-known are Freedom House's score with democratic scores, political rights and civil liberties, Polity 4's autocracy democracy scale, other ones that are listed here. There's challenges with these existing measures that VDEM's trying to address. So one is there's again lots of disagreements about what actually is a democracy. Everybody agrees that it means rule by the people, but how exactly we define that, how we measure that is there's lots of disagreement. They tend to be focused on generally these measures tend to be focused on one aspect. So are there elections? Is there turnover in government? Things like that. Coverage, they often only cover a few countries or a few years. The sources they use can be problematic. How they get their scores can be a bit opaque. We don't know, who's doing the coding, what their biases are. How the scores are created is the methodology is often clear and not clearly justified or laid out. We don't understand often if more than one person is doing the coding of a country or a democracy score, whether those two people agree and how big of agreement or disagreement that there is. And there's a perception, at least, although in truth, actually not as big a concern, but certainly a perception that that these are Western biased or U.S. biased. Some of these measures. So that's what VDEM is in part responding to. And what VDEM tries to do is present a more holistic, a more nuanced, complete picture of democracy. So the core is sort of electoral democracy. Are there elections? Are they free and fair? That's one way to think about democracy, but there's other visions or varieties of democracy. So there's liberal democracy, participatory democracy, consensual democracy, etc. And VDEM tries to provide a variety of measures that allows us to measure democracies in lots of different ways, depending on what your definition of democracy is, what you care most about. Do you care most about elections? Do you care most about participation outside of elections, or the ability to hold politicians accountable and remove governments from office, right? All these contain these different visions or varieties of democracies. So as the existing measures that cover most countries and many years measure only some of the attributes of democracy, VDEM really tries to cover virtually all conceptions of democracy. So how does VDEM do it? What does it look like? So it has, over the last many years, been creating what is now the largest database on democracy in history, and is trying to tackle a few challenges as it does so. First is the challenge of what we call empirical equivalence. So what we can measure is often kind of ambiguous. So for example, does a country hold regular elections? Let's just say I'm going to go through and code whether countries have regular elections. we're going to answer yes for a whole variety of countries that have very different levels of democracy. So we're going to answer yes for Sweden, we're going to answer yes for Germany, for Thailand, for India, for Vietnam. But again, the nature of those elections, the quality of democracy is going to vary a lot in each of those contexts. So the things we can measure often don't actually give us exactly what we want to, enough information to be able to make judgments about how democratic or autocratic a country is. Second, it turns out that the data can be manipulated. So what we can see is sometimes not an accurate reflection of reality. So let's give an example of turnout. Let's say that we see, or voting in election. We say that we see 100% of the people turn out and 90% of those vote for one party in an election. So do we then conclude that that party is popular? Well, it may be, but there's some other questions we want to ask. We want to understand, are voters forced to vote, to turn out? Are they forced to vote? Do they have limited choices, or can they vote for any party or individual they want? Who is allowed to run an election? Are there opposition parties allowed to run? Are they able to compete and campaign on a level playing field? Are the votes counted fairly, right? All of those questions we're going to want to answer before we draw any conclusions about what 90% of a vote for a party actually means. This is also the case that these things are the hardest to measure in places, in authoritarian regimes, where it's hard to monitor, see sometimes what exactly is going on. And then the final thing is that we're measuring something that are the things that are latent. So democracy, corruption, these are things we can't observe directly. Right? I can't observe. So let's again use an analogy. Let's say you want to measure health. There is no single measure of health, right? Health is this latent underlying concept that we're going to try and measure through a variety of indicators. My blood pressure, my level of cholesterol, my heart rate, right? There's what my blood tests reveal, right? All these things are going to try and get at this latent concept of the state of my health. Likewise, we're going to try and use lots of different measures of democracy, corruption, regime type to try and get at these underlying concepts of democracy and corruption. Okay, so what does VDEM look like? So VDEM is gonna give us these varieties of democracy, a comprehensive approach. It's going to emphasize multiple principles of varieties. So electoral, liberal, participatory, deliberative, egalitarian democracy. And each variety is then represented by a separate index. So in VDEM, you can look at the electoral democracy index, the liberal democracy index. And each could be sort of a separate outcome that you look at. So what's the level of participatory democracy in Thailand versus electoral democracy, for example. So we can look at several different outcomes. In addition, though, each of these indices are broken down into its constituent components. So, and each of these are measured separately. So components would include features like free and fair elections, civil liberties, judicial independence, executive constraints, gender equality, media freedom, civil society, etc. And then each of those components, many of these are indices as well, is broken down into specific indicators. So these would be individual variables. So there's currently about 450 of these individual indicators in VDEM. Some of them go all the way back to 1789. Most of them start in 1900 and move all the way to the present, and they're available for all the countries in the world. So this would be things like judicial accountability, legislative oversight, women's freedom of movement, for example. So again, just to kind of give you a sense, those 450 indicators are broken down into kind of two types. So one is our sort of factual indicators, and I'll talk more about those in a minute, and the rest are indicators that are produced from coders, from country experts, to give us roughly 20 million points of data in the VDEM data set. Okay, so what does VDEM look like? What does the team look like? We want to understand who's kind of doing all this. So VDEM consists of 5 principal investigators spread across the world, 19 project managers, of which I am one, that have expertise in one of the issues that's covered in the VDEM data set. So for example, as mentioned, I'm the manager over political parties and party systems. which meant that I helped write those questions and answer questions about that part of the data set. Then there's 33 regional managers who help recruit coders who do the coding. There's over 100 country coordinators, and then this is the most important, more than 3,700 country experts. These are the folks that are doing the real work. And then, of course, there's a support team of survey and data science experts who help put this all together and manage the project. So the result is VDEM is one of the largest, not the largest, social science data collection project in the world. Okay, so let's look a little more closely at what we're talking about. So the first step in VDEM is that research assistants will code things enter things that are factual, that can be pre-recorded, things that are not controversial. So was there an election in a given year? Yes or no? What was the date of that election? How many seats were up for grabs? How many seats did each party win? So formal things. So do women have the right to vote? Yes or no? So these are things that don't require really any interpretation, any judgment calls. These are things that we can gather. But most of what we want to know, as we talked about before, goes beyond what goes beyond those easily coded facts, right? These are things that we need to actually judgment on. And so VDEM then involves these 3,700 country experts, and they to code these subjective things. So most of the data are aggregates of these subjective impressions from well-informed country experts who are going to disagree. What is the level of judicial independence in Thailand? You're going to have coders who are going to give their assessment, and they're not all going to agree. And again, we call these coders country experts. And they each answer a survey or set of surveys for the country or countries within which they're interested. So they may answer I might, for example, be asked to do a survey in a country I know on elections and political parties. Others might answer questions on civil liberties and civil society. So they'll answer a set of these, not all of them, but a set of the surveys based on what their expertise is. Subjective in terms of subjects, and then based on the countries that they know well. So VDEM's covering a lot of ground. So you could perhaps get better outcomes if you focused on a limited time period or just on one country or a narrow question. But we want data on all countries over all time spans, and this is probably the best we can do if we're going to have that kind of approach. So we're going to focus. Let me say a bit more about these country experts. So who are they? So VDEM is only as good as these experts. So as I mentioned, there are 3,700 experts. Each of them is going to code just a handful of surveys. There is generally a minimum of 5 experts for every indicator per country. So that typically means that we have 25 or more experts per country coding in every year. Since each expert's only going to code the areas of their expertise. So I wouldn't want to code anything about the judiciary because I don't know much about the judiciary. I feel more comfortable talking about parties or elections, for example. So these pictures, by the way, are not pictures of the coders. These are the country. These are the country experts. These are pictures of the regional managers that we have. So 3 facts to kind of keep in mind about these coders. So first of all of them are experts on the given country and issue that they're coding. So they're selected based on their expertise, their experience as researchers or members of the press or other things in a given country, and given their expertise in some subject matter. Second, 2/3 of those are local experts. So they're from the country that they are coding, either nationals or residents. And then the other third would be outside experts who actively work on those particular countries. And then third, the identity of these coders is absolutely shielded, protected. So there's no way for anybody, except the central team who's giving the invitations, no way for anybody to learn the identity of those coders. And that's obviously to protect them, to be able to allow them to be completely honest about their scores, to give their honest, true opinion. So how are these coders selected? So VDEM has several criteria that they use as they're trying to select these coders. First, they're looking for people with expertise. So they want people with validated expert knowledge in the country and specific areas to be coded. They want folks with local in-depth knowledge. So by design, again, 2/3 of country experts are providing data on a country that are nationals or permanent residents of that country. So there are people who are not just sitting on the outside. They're in the country, experiencing life in that country. Second, we want people who are going to take this seriously. And this is a lot of work. I'll show you a sample page of the survey in just a minute, but this takes a lot of work, a lot of time to actually complete these surveys. We want people who are going to take it seriously, going to think carefully about the question, and not just quickly run through the survey. In fact, there's things built into the survey to weed out people who are answering too quickly, giving the same answer to every question, right? There's a lot of work to try and be sure that we've got quality answers. People are taking this seriously. EDM also works to try and recruit country experts who are going to answer the survey questions in an impartial manner. They're not going to have a political agenda, partisan agenda. People are going to disagree, but we don't want people who have a clear partisan agenda. And expert coders are asked lots of questions about their backgrounds to try and gather information about potential biases, potential agendas that they might have. And then we want diversity, right? We don't want this all being coded by university professors or members of the media, right? We want diversity as a background among the country experts chosen for a particular country, so we get a variety of different viewpoints, a variety of different types of expertise. Okay, so this is just a sample. A sample of of what a coder would see. So this is, and again, it's small, I know, but just to give you a sense, this is freedom of movement for women. So so here there's a question that people are asked to respond to. So do women enjoy freedom of movement within the country? And then there's some clarifications and instructions for the coder of what that means. And then they can answer everything from virtually no women enjoy full freedom of movement to virtually all women enjoy full freedom of movement. So they pick which answer applies best to their country. They select which years that answer would apply to over here. And then importantly, they say they have to indicate how confident are they in their answer. So I'm 100% sure this is the case, or I'm actually not very confident that I know, that in my answer, and that information is going to be used. So they're going to get access to the survey using a unique password and identity and login ID. They're going to access these surveys for a particular country, and then they're going to submit their rankings or ratings for each of these questions in the survey over whatever set of years they're focusing on. Excuse me again, and then finally they'll give their self-assessed confidence level for the rating in every country year. So how confident am I? Now once that's done, right, we've got the result is lots of data coded by these country experts. So what do we do with this? These country experts are not always going to agree. How do we then put that data together? Well, there's a data team that's in charge of putting that data together, aggregating that data, and that expert coding. And that data team, the algorithms that they use take into account expert disagreement. So things where everybody gives the same score are fairly easy. Things where some people say, it's a 0, other people say it's a 4, right? We want to pick that up. So there are measures of coder reliability and measures of the estimates of coder agreement. And so the result is VDEM produces indicators that range from 0 to 1, 1 being high, 0 being low, but that also include measures of error. So confidence intervals. So we think that our estimate is the score for this country is a 0.2 on freedom of women, but it could actually be a 0.3 or a 0.1, right? So so it's going to be somewhere in this range. Here's our best guess. For those who are more technical, what is used is the Bayesian item response theory kind of model. So the team then puts together develops these measurements using this measurement model, and then creates indices, and then finally a full data set that you can access and download. And we get a result, these measures of, this is the Electoral Democracy Index, these measures for all countries around the world over time. This is 2021, what does electoral democracy look like around the world? Okay, let's keep going here. Let's talk about, just is everybody going to agree with VDEM's coding? Of course not, right? You may look at a particular year, look at a particular indicator and say, I don't think that's right. That's okay. That's part of this part of the enterprise. One of the hallmarks of VDEM is its transparency and its openness. There's nothing that's going on behind the curtain. So you can look at every component of every index. You can see exactly what it went into every index, every measure, how the things were combined. You can look at the uncertainty. So is this something people were measuring very precisely, or things where there's a lot of disagreement? You can look at that for every component, every indicator, every index. You can look at the raw scores that are awarded by each coder if you'd like. And then you can actually see the computer code that's used to produce the indicators and the indices, et cetera. The only things that we can't see is the coder identity. That's the only thing that's not available. So you can decide, I disagree with this, where did this score come from, and then make a decision about how reliable you want to judge that particular indicator or score to be. The data from VDEM are available online for free for anybody who wants to use it. You can download the full data set. It also has a graphing feature where you can go on, pick indicators, pick countries, and graph those indicators for as many years or as many countries as you want. So I just picked here as an example the level of the different types of democracy measured in Southeast Asia across the whole, from 1990 to 2015, I believe I picked 2014. And you can generate these graphs, download these graphs, use those graphs if you'd like. I'll give you some examples here in just a minute. But again, all this is free and available for use. Okay, so what about corruption in Thailand? So as Dr. Giri mentioned, the CPI uses for part of its part of the CPI uses VDEM's political corruption index. Now, so this is the measure of the political corruption index for Thailand, and as you can see, Thailand's score is actually quite high here. It's the global average is around 0.5 or 0.6. 0.5. Southeast Asia's average is around 0.6. Thailand is sitting at around somewhere around 0.7 to a little over 0.75. Now we can see that there's a decline from the 1980s and then a small increase starting in 2014, 2015. Higher numbers here are higher levels of corruption, unlike the CPI. So Thailand, again, comparatively quite high levels of political corruption based on this measure compared to other countries around the world and even other countries in Southeast Asia. We can also, though, add confidence intervals. The blue shaded line tells us how uncertain we are. So people are fairly confident here, but there is some uncertainty, and that gives us a sense of what the range could be. Now, there's more. We don't have to stop there, though. There's more we can learn. The political corruption index is actually composed of four sets of other indicators. So there's a public sector corruption index, there's an executive corruption index, there's an indicator for legislative corruption, and there's an indicator for judicial corruption. We can look at a couple of those. We can actually drill down. VDEM allows you to drill down to the fine-grained level and see what's driving things. For example, what's driving this blip over here, this dip in 2013 in Thailand, for example. So let's start with public sector corruption. So public sector corruption measures the extent to which public sector employees grant favors in exchange for bribes, kickbacks, or other material inducements. and how often they steal, embezzle, or misappropriate funds or other state resources for personal or family use. So again, here is Thailand's Vietnam's estimate of Thailand's public sector corruption. And here we see a steady and pretty impressive improvement in Thailand's score from 1980 on, followed by a mild increase since about 2010. Now we can do more than this though. So the public sector corruption index is composed of actually a couple of other things, right? Two components. One is bribes and kickbacks. So we can look at these separately. So let's take a look at bribes and kickbacks first. Bribes and kickbacks, this is the question the coders are answering. How routinely do public sector employees grant favors in exchange for bribes, kickbacks, or other material inducements? And the responses range from, well, I'll just go through them here. So extreme, you can do 0, extremely common. Most public sector employees are systematically involved in petty but corrupt exchanges almost all the time. 1 is it's common. Such petty but corrupt exchanges occur regularly, involving a majority of public employees. 2 is sometimes. About half or less than half of public sector employees engage in such exchanges for petty gains at times. 3 is scattered. A small minority of public sector employees engage in petty corruption from time to time. And then 4 is never or hardly ever. And you can see here Thailand's score. Now, when we get to these indicators, the scale is actually flipped. So higher is now better. So 0 means really corrupt, lots of bribes. 4 is no bribes. And you can see that Thailand, again, scores fairly low, but we see sort of steady improvement through 2000 for about 10 years, and then sort of steady for about 10 years, and then a decline in the last few years, although not a steep decline. There's a second dimension here, though, to the public sector corruption, and that's how much do they steal or embezzle. So the first is bribes. Second one is embezzlements or theft. So we can look at that component and see what that says. So here's the question that country experts are being asked: how often do public sector employees steal, embezzle, or misappropriate public funds or other state resources for personal or family use? And the responses range from constantly, so public employees act as though all public resources were their personal or family property, to never or hardly ever. And again, you can see a sort of a similar pattern emerging here, right? Fairly low scores. So most people think that the corruptions around is often between often or about half the time. We start fairly low improvements over the 1980s and 1990s through the early 2000s, and sort of a steady state for about 10 years. And then a decline after that, although the decline again is fairly modest. And again, you can see the confidence intervals around there as well. So let's also look. We can also look at another component of the Vietnam's political corruption index, executive corruption. So let's do the same exercise with executive corruption. So here with the corruption indices, we range from 1 is again bad, and 0 is good on the executive corruption indices. And executive corruption indice looks at how routinely members of the executive or their agents grant favors in exchange for bribes, kickbacks, or other material inducements, and how often they steal or embezzle or misappropriate public funds. And again, there's 2 components here, right? There's the bribes and kickbacks, and there's stealing or embezzlement. And we can take a look at what's going on in each of those. So we can look at, so again, flipping the scale here now, 0 is bad, 4 is good. Here's the first question. So how routinely, to what extent do members of, how routinely do members of the executive, so that's the head of state, the head of government, and cabinet ministers, or their agents, grant favors in exchange for bribes or kickbacks or other material inducements? And the answers range from 0, it's routine and expected, to 4, it never or hardly ever happens. So you can see here Thailand does quite poorly in the 80s and 1990s, around 0, so it's routine and expected. Some improvements, so it becomes a little less routine and expected, although still quite common. Some improvement through the in the 1990s, through the 2000s. A little spike of improvement around 2013, and then sort of back to between 0 and 1 since then. So we could look then, if we were looking closely at these data, to see what happened in 2013 that led to at least a temporary improvement in the minds of coders. And again, I'm not an expert in corruption in Thailand, and so we can speculate, but I know that in 2011 there was a new law passed over procurement and contracting regulations that made it hard, that increased reporting requirements made it harder to hide, shield kickbacks and things like that. That's adopted in 2011, that goes into effect in 2012. So maybe that's what people are picking up there in that in 2013, but then that gets eclipsed by the rice pledging scandal and other scandals at the end of the Yingluck administration, and then of course the coup afterwards. So again, that allows us to kind of dig into details. We don't know exactly what coders are thinking, but that maybe gives us some clues about what was driving some of their scores. We can also look at embezzlements. Again, how often do members of the executive, heads of state, head of government, ministers, or their agents steal, embezzle, or misappropriate public funds or other state resources for their personal or family use, and it ranges from constantly to never or hardly ever. And again, a similar pattern. So coders start the period at about saying often, and we get some improvement moving towards about half the time into the 2000s, and then a slight decline after around 2013, 2014. In Thailand, at least according to these coders. So one of the things that VDEM then allows us to do is look at these things in comparison. So there's obviously lots of room for improvements in terms of corruption in Thailand. That's why we're meeting together today. But if we graph these components of the political corruption index side by side, we can see where the low-hanging fruit is. So again, none of these scores are great, but the score that sort of stands out, or the indicator that stands out as really low, is executive bribery and corruption. That's much lower than even some of these other ones. And if we looked at judicial corruption and legislative corruption, those are a bit better than even these scores. So that's really one where that's really the indicator that's pulling down Thailand's score. Again, none of these are great, but that score, according to coders, is where Thailand has a lot of improvement that it could make. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up. So VDEM provides lots of rich data for researchers. So it's there, it's free, it's easy to download, anybody could use it, and it's produced. There's a new data set every year that updates for the previous year. Coding is being done to, Mr. Geary mentioned that we want to know when these are being done. Right now, VDEM's soliciting the coders for next year. Coding will be done in January. And then the new data set usually comes out in March or April. So that, and coding for the last year. So we'll have 2002 data starting in April of 2023. VDEM then also provides tools for you to visualize the data. So lots of different graphing tools, lots of different ways to represent the data, lots of ways for you to sort of investigate what is going on, what is driving different scores, different evaluations by coders. The data come from not people sitting at, not middle-aged white guys sitting in, the United States or Sweden, but from people who are sitting in the country, who know their particular subject matter in depth, and are able to offer their opinions and their views. All aspects of the data production are open and transparent. So there's nothing being hidden, no secret things behind the curtain, no political agenda that is leading people to move scores up or down, right? You can see as much as you want. You can see how the cake is being made. And then finally, regarding corruption and VDEM's measure of political corruption, executive corruption, especially bribery and kickbacks, really stand out as the indicators that are affecting Thailand's score for the worst. I'll go ahead and stop there, but I look forward to your questions or comments.
Hi, thank you ค่ะDr. Erlen again นะคะ I will open the floor for discussion right now for about maybe 20 to 30 minutes depends okay ค่ะก็ต้องขอบคุณคุณอลันพิเกนนะคะสำหรับการแชร์ประสบการณ์แล้วก็ตัวเครื่องมือของวีเดนที่ว่านำมาทำเป็นดัชนีชีวะเพื่อให้เราเข้าใจภาพโดยรวมมากยิ่งขึ้นนะคะต่อไปนี้เดี๋ยวจะเปิดเป็นเวทีให้มีการซักถาม Q&A หรือว่าเป็น discussion กันได้นะคะไม่ทราบว่ามีใครสนใจที่จะยกประเด็นหรือว่าสอบถามในประเด็นตรงไหนไหมคะ Right. If not, then I would like to ask one question, if it's all right. Okay, so as we know, like we did quite a lot of research all around the world. And would you say is there like any interesting factor, different Thailand from other country in terms of like when you're doing the index, or like something that light up the spark up?
Yeah, so if we had time, we could actually go into VDM right now and kind of look at that together and actually investigate that question. But one of the things that pulls Thailand down is this perception that there are few checks on executive authority and authority of the government to misuse public funds. That even when they're caught, they're not punished, right? There's some news stories today about some of this going on, a recent acquittal. One of the questioners earlier mentioned political will, right? A sense that you can sort of see a concern that there's a lack of political will in Thailand being picked up in people's low evaluations of executive corruption. So that is so there's corruption across the board that people are picking up, but those are ones that where Thailand stands out as especially low compared to other countries around the world.
Thank you. And how about like how we then like closely like or coordinate with TI at all concerning on them using your index as the base or foundation for their score? Would you have like any close coordination or any like meeting yearly, annually to produce the index?
Yeah, so CPI I think asked VDM if they could use it, but in terms of how they use it in their overall CPI index, VDM doesn't have any say there. That's completely Transparency International's decision how they weight VDM's political corruption index versus the other pieces of data, the other 13 data sources they use. So that's all internal to CPI, and VDM doesn't have any say about that algorithm.
Because I have heard like some of the organization, TI did use their score and like their index. However, they did not bring like the whole set of information. So does it happen in the case of VDM as well, or they just,
No, so there's not too much coordination because VDM is doing. So these data are publicly available. Anybody could use them, and so there's really no coordination other than just Transparency International asking VDM if they could use this for their index. And I'm sure there's feedback going on. It'd be great if you would measure this or measure that, but nothing that's sort of deeper and more systematic than that I'm aware of anyway.
I see. Right. Is there any more questions from our participants? Right, then I'm afraid there won't be any more questions. So if I can I ask for one last? if from your own perspective and your opinion, like what do you think is best for Thailand to do in order to raise our CPI index or maybe the corruption index from BDM?
I'd actually say learn from Indonesia and learn from Mr. Giri. So the NACC is the institution is there, but the independence and the broader systemic support for that institution has to be there in order for it to actually function as it's at least designed on paper. This is hard to do, but the answers, it's hard to do in practice, but we know what has to be done, right? There needs to be an independent institution empowered to investigate, prosecute, educate, and prevent. And incumbents don't like that because that means that they're going to be under fire. So there needs to be that institutional authority established and defended, and the public can help there by through the media, through social movements, through civil society actions to put pressure on governments to do that. Governments very rarely want to do this, very rarely volunteer to do this, right? It's usually through some pressure as a result of some scandal, but we sort of know the ingredients. It's hard to put into practice because incumbents don't like to be monitored and constrained. So
thank you very much again, Mr. Karan Piken, right. So I think that should probably be it for today. ก็คือต้องขอบคุณทุกท่านที่เข้ามารับชมรับฟังนั่นเลยนะคะแล้วก็ขอบพระคุณท่านวิทยากรทั้งสองอีกครั้งนะคะ Mr. Giri Supadiono แล้วก็ดร. Karan Piken นะคะที่วันนี้ได้มีโอกาสเข้ามาแชร์ประสบการณ์แล้วก็องค์ความรู้หรือแม้แต่ว่าตัวอินเด็กซ์ต่างๆที่มีความเกี่ยวข้องกับการยกระดับการรับรู้ทางทุจริตนะคะ CPI ของประเทศไทยแล้วก็ของประเทศเพื่อนบ้านแล้วก็องค์กรต่างชาตินะคะยังไงวันนี้ก็ต้องขอบคุณทุกท่านที่เข้ามาร่วมรับชมรับฟังนะคะถ้าเกิดมีคอมเมนต์หรืออะไรสามารถเผยแพร่หรือว่าแชร์กันมาต่อใน Facebook ได้นะคะยังไงก็ต้องขอบคุณมากๆเลยแล้วถ้าเกิดในวันหน้าหรืออนาคตข้างหน้าเรามีกิจกรรมเวทีหรือว่าสนทนาสาธารณะอีกครั้งเนี่ยเราก็จะมีการเผยแพร่ใน Facebook แล้วก็ให้ทุกท่านได้รับชมอีกค่ะยังไงวันนี้ก็ต้องขอบคุณทุกท่านอีกครั้งมากจริงๆนะคะยังไงเดี๋ยวขอลากันไปก่อนนะคะสวัสดีค่ะ